January 23, 1996 Wrestling Observer Newsletter. WCW threatens lawsuit. Raw vs. Nitro ratings battle. Week of major title changes expected. Tons more. By Observer staff. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228. January 23, 1996. The WWF/WCW wrestling war got stranger on January 15 when Eric Bischoff, who started the television name-calling campaign, abruptly shut up and WCW ignored all the barbs thrown in its direction. After a televised skit which implied that WCW doesn't have a legitimate steroid policy, WCW responded first with threats of a lawsuit, which would have little chance of success for a number of reasons: that the skit was labeled satire, that the performers portrayed Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage are both public figures and both have an admitted history of steroid use, although Savage has labeled his history experimenting, and that there are a lot of legitimate question marks regarding the WCW policy, then with Bischoff defending the policy in place and pointing remarks back at the WWF by noting that 3 current WWF headliners, without any names being mentioned, had failed steroid tests while with WCW. Of course, that plan of action wasn't well thought out, since none of the 3 performers were ever suspended for steroid use while with WCW. It is believed that all 3 headlined WCW pay-per-view shows immediately after such a positive test result. Since the names were not revealed, I can only speculate about the last statement, although I've got a good idea who they are and that the last statement is probably accurate. At least one of the 3, possibly more, did attend a counseling session after failing a test. It's well known that WWF performer Sid Audi, while with WCW, walked out on a steroid test at least once and was still promised the WCW Heavyweight Championship and would have won the title from Vader at Starrcade 93 instead of Ric Flair, who was planned on being phased at that point to a mid-card performer, had the incident in England with Arnold Anderson not taken place. If anything, that admission puts more question into the current WCW policy. Nevertheless, the word is Bischoff's about face on the Monday Nitro show, never acknowledging or knocking WWF during the show, and never acknowledging a few remarks by Steve McMichael when he broached the subject talking about throwing away your channel clicker, is a response to the criticism of Bischoff the previous week as his knocks at WWF got in the way of getting over the wrestling he was presenting. It was a valid criticism, and Bischoff's response on January 15 of ignoring the steroid jab, a subject he'd best ignore until he's got real answers and has a real response, was the best policy for 3 reasons. 1. He was more focused on getting over his own product than the WCW announcing crew has been for a long time, which has been a major company weakness. 2. His reaction the previous week of name-calling came off childish. 3. That subject is something he'd best ignore publicly until he's got real answers and has a real response. Bischoff is expected to broach the subject at some point publicly over the next few weeks. Whether he'll give real answers and a real response is the next question. From early indications, statements released on his own hotline and a newspaper interview, my speculation is his response will be along the lines of saying that we have a policy and we don't have a steroid problem. I seem to recall that being said in wrestling before by some other guy, and it brings up the classic statement about those who don't learn from the lessons of history being doomed to repeat its mistakes. WWF continued to play its billionaire Ted sketches implying WCW's wrestlers were on steroids and that they don't have legitimate testing all weekend, so whatever legal threats didn't seem to scare anyone off. A new sketch aired on January 15 on Raw, but this time it was put in the middle of the show rather than at the end, although it was constantly referred to both before and after. While funny, it really didn't have much of a punch. It tried to imply Ted Turner wanted to buy the WWF but he couldn't, that he wished he had Shawn Michaels instead of Hulk Hogan, which, despite the relative in-ring ability of each, is a joke based on each's respective name value, and that all WCW was able to buy from WWF was a con man, Gene Okerlund someone disloyal, Randy Savage, and a has-been from the 80s, Hogan. There's no arguing point 1. There's some truth to point 3. And naturally McMahon shows his incredible gall on point 2. This is a business, and because a man gets a better business offer, someone in a business that lacks almost all ethics to begin with, labels that person as disloyal. Wouldn't you think it would be disloyal to turn on the man who more than anyone else made someone and his company the financial success they were at their peak and was a key beneficial witness to his acquittal in his steroid trial? Not in pro wrestling. It's just business. For January 8, both Nitro and Raw drew their best numbers since the Monday Night Wars began. Raw scored a 3.0 rating and 4.1 share to Nitro's 2.8 and 3.9, while the Nitro replay did a 1.1 rating and 3.1 share. The number were partially boosted by the fact that more people were watching television on January 8 than any Monday in the history of television due to the blizzard. No Monday Night Football is also going to bump up the wrestling ratings for the next 8 months. Expect this to be a week of major title changes. Besides at least one and possibly two possible switches in the WWF, it is expected that the WCW title will go back to Randy Savage shortly. It could be as early as the January 22 Nitro show. WCW both leaks out false information and compounds that by changing its mind on an hourly basis, so there is almost no such thing as something etched in stone before it happens. Nevertheless, there is at press time a definite plan for Savage to get the title. In an example of how booking philosophy in pro wrestling has changed in recent years from the 70s to booking to placate egos rather than to maximize one match, Savage, who put up an incredible fit after being booked by Ric Flair to put him over last June despite Flair using a gimmick in the finish, lost via submission once again to Lex Luger on Nitro. Flair, who never wins against top-level guys, got a pin victory over Sting, although tainted by interference of Luger, but Flair doesn't like to win clean over almost anyone anyway. In the 70s, this would lead to Flair versus Luger. But in the 90s it leads to Flair losing the title to Savage, as since Savage is getting the strap, he'd be in the mood where he'll put someone over on the way. Flair, who almost never gets to win, is given the win over Sting as a consolation prize for having the title taken from him. And the match is hyped for January 22 when the switch was initially planned to take place. The title may not change hands that night and it may be moved to the February pay-per-view, and after all this is printed, WCW could conceivably change plans again. The scheduled lineup for the February 18 In Your House may be revealing when it comes to the Royal Rumble finishes. The announced lineup for the show at the Louisville Gardens has Bret Hart defending the WWF title against Diesel in a cage match, Razor Ramon defending the IC title against Goldust, Smoking Guns defending the tag team titles against Skip and Zip, Undertaker vs. Yokozuna in a casket match, and Shawn Michaels vs. Owen Hart. As far as lineup depth is concerned, this may be the best they've presented. Naturally, this is all subject to changes. Every recent WWF pay-per-view has seen lineup changes almost by the week. In addition, one or even more of these matches may wind up as a dark match, although from the lineup, my guess is the only one of these bouts that might be dark would be Undertaker's match. If we're to look at this lineup and how it relates to the Rumble, one would figure Diesel getting involved in the Bret Hart-Undertaker match similar to their early meetings on the road in late November. Most likely a clean finish would have never been in the cards for that match because they don't want to hurt Undertaker's supernatural gimmick, and it also doesn't seem to make sense to put the strap on him. Both the IC and tag titles are possible changes in controversial fashion since they've got rematches booked. My feeling all along was that 1-2-3 Kid and Sid were being groomed for the tag titles, and with Sid out of action with a neck injury for 2 months they may have missed their window of opportunity. Given the build-up, Goldust was probable to win the IC strap as well, with probably the main obstacle in his path not being how disappointing the gimmick has gotten over but the opposition to both the gimmick and to him getting the title from the clique, which wanted one of its own, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, to be the one Razor Ramon dropped the strap to. Michaels vs. Hart on paper looks to be the show stealer. There were several final Royal Rumble changes over the weekend. As mentioned above, with Sid out of action with a disc problem in his neck, the tag title match was changed to the Bodydonis as challengers. Also in the Rumble will be the Head Hunters, who will go by the name of the Squat Team. The situation with Sabu in the Rumble got even stranger and left the WWF totally frustrated by the end of the week. It was presumed to be a dead deal last week when Paul Heyman convinced Sabu not to work the show after Sabu had initially had friends contact J.J. Dillon at the WWF. WWF agreed to use him initially, presumably for the same $5,000 figure that they were offering other outsiders for one-shots. They also were going to allow him to bring his own table and break it by diving over the top, eliminating himself, so he could get his gimmick over on a major pay-per-view show, and were also going to allow him to use his name. After Heyman put the kibosh to the deal, and made it very public at the ECW Arena show, a skit which I'm presuming Heyman put together to make sure everyone knew in case Sabu did do it, that he'd be able to portray it as a slap in the face to ECW fans and thus enable him to phase down or get rid of the popular Sabu, who once again let down his loyal fans if he were to do the show. Early in the week, Sabu was convinced by those same friends/business acquaintances, including NWA promoter Dennis Coralluzzo, who has a long-standing rivalry with Heyman, to not listen to Heyman and agree to do the Rumble anyway. Sabu told them he would at least consider it, if not outright do it. Sabu, instead of making the call to WWF, put everything in the hands of the Sheik, who at first nixed the WWF, and later in the week, after being offered a booking payoff rumored to be $3,000 from Bruce Pritchard, which may have included him accompanying Sabu to ringside, although that isn't clear, changed his tune and agreed for Sabu to do the show. WWF then taped Royal Rumble promos with Sabu's name being part of the show during the latter part of the week, and the WWF announced on its hotline that Sabu from ECW would be in the Rumble. Pritchard then offered Heyman several WWF wrestlers to work ECW in exchange for using Sabu, but Heyman said he wasn't interested. Heyman then put pressure on Sabu once again, and Sabu once again backed out of the deal. Heyman doesn't want any of his performers to appear on a WWF pay-per-view show before he does a pay-per-view show of his own, both because he says he promised those willing to put him on pay-per-view that he would have entirely different performers than WWF and WCW, and also because he's wanting to avoid the perception problem of being a minor league feeder system to WWF, which would hurt in the pay-per-view marketplace. According to an item in the January 14 Boston Herald, another name considered for the Rumble that didn't materialize was boxer Peter McNeely. According to the item, McNeely, now famous for being in a pizza commercial where he knocks himself out trying to eat a pizza, was invited and would have been tossed out in 89 seconds, the same time of his fight with Mike Tyson, and his manager, Vinny Varione, was going to interfere as a spoof on the Tyson fight. According to Varione, Titan told him to name his figure, but when he did, they never called back. No doubt his figure was well above the $5,000 Titan was offering outsiders for participation. The fly in the ointment, so to speak, on the story is that it said McNeely would have been thrown out of the ring by The Undertaker. Undertaker, of course, is not in the Rumble, nor has he ever been scheduled for it at any time in the planning. Brett vs. Undertaker as the Rumble main event was on the books many months ago. McNeely has a very brief part in the UFC pregame show on its last pay-per-view, getting exactly 89 seconds on an interview before being given the hook. The triple_A/Televisa split was resolved this past week, with Televisa both taping and televising the AAA show on January 12 in Nezahualcóyotl and airing it in the regular time slot on January 14. In addition, on January 13, Televisa aired a tape of the December 18 show in Leon that they had in the can for the past several weeks. AAA had been off television the previous weekend when owner Antonio Pena and Televisa had a split-up over Televisa's directive that all television tapings in 1996 take place in the Mexico City metropolitan area to save the company travel costs. Pena felt that with AAA taping 2 shows every week in the Mexico City area, along with the 2 EMLL shows taped every week in Mexico City, it would destroy an already burned-out marketplace both when it comes to attendance and fan heat, both which would result in a worse television product. During the week, Pena began negotiating with TV Azteca, CH13 in Mexico City, which would be the equivalent of dropping from NBC to Fox, or maybe worse. Televisa aired a taped soccer game on January 6 and a 3-hour block of EMLL that was pretty much described as dreadful on January 7. When the weekend ratings came in, the triple_A/EMLL block on Saturday night does a 10 rating and is the 5th highest rated show of the entire evening on all of Mexican television. Televisa called Pena during the week to put things back together. The two sides agreed by the weekend, and Televisa cameras were at the AAA show on January 12, although terms of the new deal won't be talked about until this coming week. This left EMLL promoter Paco Alonso in the same situation that Pena was in just a few months ago. Alonso, sensing Pena was on the ropes, had a meeting of all his wrestlers on January 12, saying that anyone who worked Juan Herrera shows, which had formerly been affiliated with Alonso but Herrera switched affiliation to Pena, would be through, and told the wrestlers that EMLL would be having 5 hours a week of television on Televisa and that AAA was off forever. This is probably what he had been led to believe by Televisa. This was similar to how Pena was led to believe by Televisa and then told his wrestlers that EMLL was going to be off Televisa. Alonso also told the wrestlers that without television that the AAA house show promoters would be switching over to EMLL, thus, even though lots of wrestlers would be jumping over, the wrestlers would be getting enough bookings. The timing of the meeting couldn't have been worse, as AAA reappeared on Televisa the next night, which couldn't have helped him credibility with his wrestlers. In a story that may have major implications into this business, Don King and Bob Arum have buried the hatchet to promote the Oscar de la Hoya vs. Julio Cesar Chavez boxing match in June. The fight is considered at the present time to be the biggest money non-Tyson event boxing can produce right now. The implication as far as wrestling goes is that King and Arum are going back to the 70s and closed-circuiting the event in arenas and not putting it on pay-per-view. Arum claimed in an article in the Las Vegas Review-Journal that weren't putting the match on pay-per-view because there is too much pirating, and claimed as many as 6 million of the nearly 25 million home pay-per-view universe may have illegal boxes. Arum said this was a test market, and if it is a success, then King would probably pull Tyson from pay-per-view as well, and the big boxing matches would go back to closed circuit. In actuality, this dispute with pay-per-view is more about percentage split than pirating. Right now the promoters get about 45% of the pay-per-view revenue, with the rest going to the cable companies and the distributors. The boxing promoters are attempting to get their percentage bumped up to 60% or more. The WWF tried a similar campaign in 1989, threatening to pull WrestleMania, which at the time was the big money event on pay-per-view, to eliminate the middlemen in the food chain, a tactic that didn't work, and the WWF eventually had to back down at the end. Even if the boxing promoters are able to get their percentage bumped up, which looks from the outside to be unlikely, there is no guarantee it would be across the board and that pro wrestling would benefit from it. Major events wrestling calendar: January 19th to February 19. January 21st WWF Royal Rumble pay-per-view, Fresno, California Convention Center. Bret Hart vs. Undertaker. January 22nd WWF Monday Night Raw taping, Stockton, California Civic Auditorium. January 22nd WCW Monday Nitro tapings, Las Vegas Caesars Palace. Hogan vs. Gang. January 22nd All Japan Women Tokyo Ota War Gymnasium. Toyota vs. Honda. January 23rd WCW Clash of Champions, Las Vegas Caesars Palace. Flair and Giant vs. Hogan and Savage. January 23rd WWF Superstars taping, San Jose, California Schurik Arena. Bret Hart vs. Diesel. January 24th Rings, Tokyo Budokan Hall. Maeda vs. Yamamoto. January 26th WWF New York Madison Square Garden. Bret Hart vs. Diesel. January 27th ECW Philadelphia ECW Arena. February 28th WWF Philadelphia Core State Spectrum. Bret Hart vs. Diesel. January 28th Race pay-per-view taping, Yokohama Bunka Gym. Suzuki vs. Frank Shamrock. January 29th WCW Monday Nitro taping, Canton, Ohio Civic Center. Hogan vs. Giant. February 3 New Japan Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center. Kobayashi vs. Nagami. February 4 New Japan Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center. Nishimura and Kojima vs. Tenzan and Hiro Saito. February 5 WCW Monday Nitro tapings, Lakeland, Florida Civic Center. February 11 WCW Super Brawl pay-per-view, St. Petersburg Bayfront Center. Hogan vs. Giant. February 12 WCW Monday Nitro tapings, Tampa Fairgrounds. February 16 UFC pay-per-view, San Juan Roberto Clemente Stadium. Ken Shamrock vs. Chemo. February 18 WWF In Your House pay-per-view, Louisville Gardens. Bret Hart vs. Diesel. February 18 WCW Baltimore Arena. Flair vs. Sting. February 19 WWF Monday Night Raw taping, Cincinnati Gardens. February 19 WCW Monday Nitro taping, Salisbury, MDY Comico Civic Center. Results. January 1st Mexico City, _A/CMLL Megali and La Infernal B Pantera Serena and La Practicante, Pequeno Titan and Mascara de Sagrada B Pequeno Pierroth and Jurito Estrada, Torchigillo Karatica Dos and Superstar and Angel de Tepeyac B Black Cat Dos and Ravana and Duende, Blue Demon Jr. and Super Muñeco and Fantastic and Mascara Magica B Super Bowl and Scorpio Jr. and Ems1 and Bucanero Jr. DQ, Mascara Sagrada and El Hijo del Santo and Demon Jr. B Purata Morgan and Mascara Año 2000 and Universo 2000 DQ. January 3rd Memphis, USWA, 800, King Cobra B Smoky Mountain Massacre. UWA Women's Title, Miss Texas B Debbie Combs, Scott Bowden B Downtown Bruno. Brian Christopher B Coco Ware. USWA Tag Titles vs. Leaving Town, Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert B Jesse James Armstrong and Tracy Smothers to win titles. USWA Title, Tex Slazenger B Jerry Lawler, Texas Deathmatch, PG-13 B Rock and Roll Express. Doug Gilbert won Royal Rumble to earn shot in WWF Rumble. January 3rd Mexico City, EMLL Pequeno Archangel and Ciclanchito Ramirez B Guerrerito Maya and Damian Cito. Lady Apache won triangular match from Tanya and Maria del Angel. Silver King and Hector Garza and Olympico B Archangel and Astro Jr. and Cranio, Los Brazos B El Satanico and Mano Negra and Gran Marcus Jr. January 5th Dallas Sportatorium CWA pay-per-view taping, 2,600/virtually all paper, Action Jackson B Golden Chicano, Chico Caballo, Hector Guerrero B Kit Carson. 1-hour football match. Bo Vegas and Devin Michaels and Mark Valiant and Scott Putski and Steve Cox and Dom Minaldi B Chip the Firebreaker and Rod Price and John Hawk and Sean Summers and Alex Porto and Guido Falcone. Falcone and Vito Mussolini B Sam Houston and Johnny Mantel DQ. January 5th Netzawal Coyote, AAA, 3,000 sellout. La Sirenita and La Rosa B La Briosa and Neftali. Espectritos Uno and Dos B Baby Rabbit and Super Muñequito. Mr. Condor and Marabunta and El Bronco D Angel de Tepeyac and Salcero and Principe Zafiro. Jerry Estrada and Picudo and Juventud Guerrera B El Mexicano and Heavy Metal and Latin Lover DQ. Cien Cars and Mascara Sagrada and Octagon B Pierroth Jr. and Cybernetico and Pentagon DQ. January 5th Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL, 300. Orito and Ciclantito Ramirez b Felinito and Damian Cito. America Lynx b Olympus and Ultimatum. Chicago Express and Moger and Damian El Guerrero b El Hijo del Solitario and Olympico and Justiciero. Los Brazos b Gran Marcos Jr. and Bestia Salvaje and El Hijo del Gladiador DQ. Shocker and Atlantis and Hector Garza b Negro Casas and El Satanico and Dr. Wagner Jr. January 6, Mexico City Deportivo Oceania, AAA, 3,250 sellout. Los Matemáticos Uno and Dos Picanaya I and El Bronco. Quarterback and Caras La Momia and Espectro b Superstar and Slayer and Kickboxer Volador and El Mexicano and Torero b Misterioso and Black Cat Dos and Perro Silva. Los Payasos b Supercolo and Winners and Frisbee. Los Villanos b Conan and La Parca and Tinieblas Jr. January 7, Vancouver, Washington, Championship Wrestling USA. Dane Rush D. Richie Magnette, Colonel De Beers and Buddy Wayne b Bart Sawyer and Samito DQ Slam. Lynn Denton b Tackle Lou Andrews b Bruiser Brian. Billy Jack Haynes b Jimmy Snuka DQ. January 7, Houma, Louisiana, Mid-South Wrestling, 200 Mr. President b High Voltage. TJ Sullivan b Mustang Mike, Snapper b Steve Diamond, Don DiBiase b Bourbon Street Brawler, Crazy Joe DDQ Southern Patriot. Joe Chain and Richie Valentine b Half-Breed and Frankie Jeffrey. Sandman. Not ECW Wrestler. B Bronco Bob. January 8, Kochi, All Japan, 2,600 sellout. Masao Inoue b Monukia Mossman. Satoru Asako b Kentaro Shiga. Yoshinari Ogawa and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi b Rex King and Steve Dahl. Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura and Mitsuo Momoto b Mighty Inoue and Haruka Eigen and Masa Fuchi. Johnny Ace b Ryukaku Izumida, Gary Albright and Joel Deaton and Bobby Duncombe Jr. b The Patriot and the Eagle and the Lacrosse. Stan Hansen b Takawa Mori, Minoru Misawa and Kenta Kobashi and Jun Akiyama b Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Tao and Tamon Honda 2333. January 8, Gamagori FMW, Tetsuhiro Kuroda b Nanjo. Combat Toyota and Aki Kanbayashi b Yukari Ishikura and Kaori Nakayama. Katsutoshi Niyama b Gasaku Goshigawara, Megumi Kudo and Yuki Nabano b Bad Nurse Nakamura and Miwa Sato, Super Leather and Jason the Terrible b Riki Fuji and Hisakatsu Oya. Street Fight, Mitsuhiro Matsunaga and Wing Kanemura and Hideki Hasaka and Haido b Hayabusa and Masato Tanaka and Koji Nakagawa and Horace Boulder. January 8, Kitakyushu, IWA, 380, Tutor the Turtle b Daisuke Tao, Keisuke Yamada and Keizo Matsuda b Mr. Ganasuke and Mitsunobu Kikuzawa, Matsuda 1 Battle Royal, Baggerjeet Singh b Katsumi Hirano, Tarzan Goto and Flying Kid Ichihara b Takashi Okano and Shoji Nakamaki 2430. Leatherface and Cactus Jack b Headhunters. January 9, Cornwall, ONT, WWF, 1900, Savio Vega b Barry Horowitz, Henry Godwin b Isaac Yonkam, Marty Jannetty b Aldo Montoya, Goldust b Bob Holly, Fuddy b Bob Backlund. WWF Tag Titles. Smoking Guns b Skip and Zip, Diesel and Razor Ramon b Hunter Hurst Helmsley and Jeff Jarrett, Ahmed Johnson b Davey Boy Smith DQ, Bret Hart and Undertaker b Yokozuna and Owen Hart. January 9, Nagasaki, IWA, 550 sellout, Daisuke Tao b Tutor the Turtle, Leatherface and Keizo Matsuda b Flying Kid Ichihara and Mitsunobu Kikuzawa, Tiger Jeet Singh b Katsumi Hirano, Headhunters b Shoji Nakamaki and Takashi Okano, Tarzan Goto and Mr. Ganasuke b Keisuke Yamada and Cactus Jack. January 9, Yamato FMW, Yukari Ishikura and Yuki Nabano b Aki Kanbayashi and Kaori Nakayama, Hideki Hasaka b Riki Fuji, Combat Toyota b Miwa Sato, Koji Nakagawa and Katsutoshi Niyama b Gasaku Goshigawara and Nanjo, Horace Boulder b Jason the Terrible, Megumi Kudo b Bad Nurse Nakamura, Hisakatsu Oya b Super Leather, Street Fight, Haido and Wing Kanemura and Mitsuhiro Matsunaga b Hayabusa and Masato Tanaka and Tetsuhiro Kuroda. January 9, Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL, prelim results unavailable. Ninja del Fuego and Kato Kung Lee Sr. and Mascara Magica b Damien El Guerrero and Espectro Jr. and Cadaver de Ultra Tumba, Astro Jr. and Archangel and Grand Marcus Jr. b Brazo de Oro and El Brazo and Pantera, Dos Caras and Silver King and Brazo de Plata b Mano Negra and El Satanico and Dr. Wagner Jr. January 10, Atlanta Center Stage, WCW Saturday Night Tapings, 800 sellout / all freebies. Non-squash results, WCW title, Randy Savage b Ric Flair DQ, Eddie Guerrero b Chris Benoit, Chris Kanyon and Mark Starr b Dick Slater and Bunkhouse Buck, Arnold Anderson b Bubba Rogers, One Man Gang b Giant Ninja Ron Race, Alex Wright b Dean Malenko DQ, WCW Tag Titles, Harlem Heat B Sting and Lex Luger DQ Diamond Dallas Page B Steve Armstrong, WCW TV title, Johnny B Bad B Mang Sting and Lex Luger B Barrio Brothers, Joey Maggs B VK Wall Street DQ Road Warrior Hawk B Kurosawa, Hawk B Fidel Sierra. January 10th Hakata, All Japan, 2,700 sellout, Rex King and Steve Dolby Monokia Mossman and Kentaro Shiga, The Eagle and the Lacrosse B Masao Inoue and Takao Mori, Tamon Honda B Ryukaku Izumida, Mighty Inoue and Haruka Eigen and Masa Fuchibi Joel Deaton and Mitsuo Momota and Rusher Kimura, The Patriot and Johnny Ace B Tsuyoshi Kikuchi and Yoshinari Ogawa, Kena Kobashi B Satoru Asako, Mitsuharu Misawa B Jun Akiyama, Giant Baba and Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Taubi Stan Hansen and Gary Albright and Bobby Duncombe Jr. January 10th Chiba FMW 3100 sellout Riki Fujibi Nanjo, Bad Nurse Nakamura B Yuki Nabano, Jason the Terrible and Hideki Hasaka B Tetsuhiro Kuroda and Katsutoshi Niyama, Chain Match, Super Leather B Horace Boulder, Hisakatsu Oya B Daisuke Ikeda, Asia Kong B Combat Toyota, Chigusa Nagio B Megumi Kudo, No Rope Barbed Wire Spider Mat Double Hell Death Match, Mitsuhiro Matsunaga and Wing Kanemura and Haido B Hayabusa and Masato Tanaka and Koji Nakagawa. January 10th Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center, Michinoku Pro 5070 Terry Boy and Satobi Masato Yakashiji and Naohiro Hoshikawa Hanzo Nakajima Yone Jinjin, Tiger Mask and Kamikaze, Yuki Ishikawa, Ishoichi Funaki and Takamichinoku, Super Delphin B Shiryu, Street Fight, Great Sasuke and Giant Zebra, Shunji Takano, B Mr. Pogo and Grand Naniwa 2337. January 10th Niage, IWA, 230 Takeshi Sato B Daisuke Tao, Keisuke Yamada and Keizo Matsuda B Tutor the Turtle and Mitsunobu Kikuzawa, Tiger Jeet Singh B Mr. Genesu, Cactus Jack and Takashi Okano B Tarzan Goto and Flying Kid Ichihara 2747, Headhunters B Leatherface and Shoji Nakamaki. January 10th Hitachi Naka, All Japan Women, 1120 Yoshiko Tamura B Marimogami and Keo Nomi, Mina Tanayama B Yumi Fukawa Atsuko Mita and Kumiko Maikawa and Misae Watanabe B Mariko Yoshida and Kaoru Ito and Shaparita Asari, Yukishina and Mima Shimoda B Tomoko Watanabe and Nobu Endo, Yumiko Hata B Tashio Yamada Kyoko Inoue and Takako Inoue B Manami Toyota and Saki Hasegawa. January 11th Kumamoto IWA, 1300 Tutor the Turtle B Daisuke Tao, Katsumi Hirano B Mitsunobu Kikuzawa, Flying Kid Ichihara B Takashi Okano, Okano 1 Battle Royal Tiger Jeet Singh B Shoji Nakamaki Headhunters B Keizo Matsuda and Keisuke Yamada, Tarzan Goto and Mr. Genesuke B Leatherface and Cactus Jack. January 11th Kagoshima, JWP Hiromi Sugo B Kanako Mototani, Boyoshoa Kid B Tomoko Kuzumi, Saburo and Tomoko Miyaguchi B Yuki Miyazaki and Rieko Amano, Cutie Suzuki and Mayumi Ozaki B Hiromi Yagi and Devil Masami 2408, JWP title, Dynamite Kansai B Hikari Fukuoka. January 11th Toyota, All Japan Women, 1520 Yukishina and Keo Nomi B Misae Watanabe and Marimogami, Nobu Endo B Yoshiko Tamura, Saki Hasegawa and Kaoru Ito and Yumi Fukawa B Tomoko Watanabe and Kumiko Makawa and Mina Tanayama, Manami Toyota and Mariko Yoshida B Atsuko Mita and Kyoko Inoue, Takako Inoue B Shaparita Asari, Asia Kong and Tashio Yamada B Mima Shimoda and Yumiko Hata. January 11th Shelbyville, Tennessee, All State Wrestling, 124, Shane Morton B Quen Quarisma, Chris Kearns B Nightmare, Robbie Rage NC Regina Hale, Ben Mullins and Ashley Hudson B Backwoods Brawlers, Gypsy Joe B Yoshi Kwan DQ, Jason Vaughn and Smooth Operator B Strictly Business. January 12th Montreal Forum WWF, 10,01 June 8000 paid, Fatu B Bob Backlund 2 stars, Skip and Zip B Bob Holly and Aldo Montoya 2 stars, Duke Dries B Barry Horowitz 1 1/2 star, Marty Jannetty B Sir Mo 1/2 of 1 star, Goldust B Henry Godwin 1 1/2 star, Ahmed Johnson B Isaac Yankem 1 star, WWF Tag Titles, Smoking Guns B Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith 2 stars, Razor Ramon and Savio Vega B Hunter Hurst Helmsley and Jeff Jarrett 2 1/2 stars, Undertaker B Yokozuna Dud, Cage Match for WWF title, Bret Hart B Diesel 2 1/2 stars. January 12th Takamatsu, All Japan, 2400, Tsuyoshi Kikuchi B Monokia Mossman, The Eagle and the Lacrosse B Kentaro Shiga and Satoru Asako, Ryukaku Izumida B Takao Mori, Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura and Mitsuo Momota B Mighty Inoue and Haruka Eigen and Masa Fuchi, Akira Tao B. Masao Inoue, Johnny Ace, and the Patriot B. Steve Dahl and Joel Deaton PWF Junior title. Yoshinari Ogawa B. Rex King, Toshiaki Kauda B. Tamon Honda, Mitsuharu Misawa and Kena Kobashi and Jun Akiyama B. Stan Hansen and Gary Albright and Bobby Duncombe Jr. January 12, Toyohashi, All Japan Women, Kumiko Makawa and Mari Mogami B. Mina Tanayama and Keo Nomi, Misae Watanabe B. Yumi Fukawa, Mariko Yoshida and Kaoru Ito and Nobu Endo B. Shaparita Asari and Yuka Shina and Yoshiko Tamura, Yumiko Hata and Tomoko Watanabe B. Tashio Yamada and Takako Inoue, Kyoko Inoue B. Atsuko Mitai, Asia Kong and Mima Shimoda B. Saki Hasegawa and Manami Toyota. January 12, Netsuwal Koyo, AAA, 3000 sellout, prelim results unavailable, Luxor and Boomerang and Thunderbird and Venom and Discovery B. Marabunta and Mr. Condor and Duende and Bronco and Rocky Santana DQ Mexican tag titles, Psicosis and Juventud Guerrero B. Volador and El Mexicano to win vacant titles, La Parca and Octagon and Mascara Sagrada B. Killer and Pentagon and Pierroth Jr. DQ. January 12, Mexico City Arena Coliseo EMLL, prelim results unavailable, Reyes Veloz and Escudero Rojo and Bucanero B. Olympus and Antifaz and Scorpion, Lismark and Dandy and La Fiera D. Black Panther and Felino and Mascara Año 2000, Atlantis and Shocker and Hector Garza B. Negro Casas and Emilio Charles Jr. and Apollo Dantes. January 12, Dallas Sportatorium, Confederate Wrestling Alliance, 650/heavily papered, Alan Action Jackson B. Mike and Buster Blackheart, Rod Price B. Scott Putski, Bo Vegas B. John Hawk DQ, Devin Michaels B. Bill Irwin, Johnny Mantell and Sam Houston B. Guido Falcone and Vito Mussolini. January 12, Wayne, Michigan, Great Lakes Wrestling, 240, Steve Nixon B. Rico Rodriguez, Calavera Cortez B. Nixon, Rodriguez B. Cortez, Death Dealer D. Skull Gans, Geza Coleman and Brian Rollins B. Casey Thunder and Terry Richards, Mike Kelly 1 Bunkhouse Rumble D. Low Brown B. Rock Stevens. January 12, Rossville, Georgia, TWA, Scott James B. Samurai Dragon, Mr. Payne B. Michael Collins, Joel Travis B. Chuck Colt, Jimmy Sharp B. New One Man Gang DQ Roger Sartain and Rick Justice B. Keith Hart and Sam Colt. January 12, Reseda, Slammers, Bodine D. Bill Pearl, Dynamite D. and El Toro Bravo B. Samoan Kid and Jimmy James, Bravo NC Movie Star Mike, Bruce Bodine 1 Bunkhouse Battle Royal, Jeff Lindbergh B. Bodine. January 12, Spring Place, Georgia, World Christian Federation, Johnny Quaz B. Joey Funk, Chief Little Lynn B. Terry Phoenix, Chris Walker B. Intruder, Billy Montana and Ken Arden B. William Bruce and Jamie Strong, Joey Maggs B. David Young. January 13, Gifu, All Japan Women, 1435, Yukashina and Mari Mogami B. Yumi Fukawa and Keo Nomi, Yoshiko Tamura B. Mina Tanayama, Kaoru Ito and Saki Hasegawa and Misae Watanabe B. Nobu Endo and Kumiko Makawa and Tashio Yamada, Mariko Yoshida and Manami Toyota B. Atsuko Mita and Shaparita Asari, Asia Kong B. Mima Shimoda, Kyoko Inoue and Takako Inoue B. Yumiko Hata and Tomoko Watanabe. January 13, Kainan, IWA Tutor the Turtle B. Daisuke Tao, Leatherface and Takashi Okano B. Flying Kid Ichihara and Mr. Ganasu, Tiger Jeet Singh B. Katsumi Hirono, Cactus Jack and Keizo Matsuda B. Mitsunobu Kikuzawa and Tarzan Goto, Headhunters B. Shoji Nakamaki and Keisuke Yamada. January 13, Tokyo Korakuen Hall Battlerts, 2222 sellout, Takashi Okamura b. Pequeno Guerrero, Minoru Tanaka b. Satoshi Yoniyama, Takeshi Ono b. Axe Thunder Otsuka, Koji Nakagawa and Tetsuhiro Kuroda b. Riki Fuji and Hisakatsu Oya, Super Delphin and Takamichi no Ku b. Great Sasuke and Naohiro Hoshikawa, Yuki Ishikawa and Shoichi Funaki b. Daisuke Ikeda, and Katsumi Yujuda. January 13, Indianapolis Pro Wrestling International, Top Rope Troy B. American Kickboxer Quicksilver b. TJ Powers, Rex b. Sergeant Nelson, El Diablo b. Austin James, Bobo Brazil Jr. b. Madman Pondo Nelson and Austin James b. Bounty Hunter and Rock and Roll Rebel, Von Blitzkrieg and Autobahn, love that name, Powers in handicap match to win PWI tag titles, Pondo b. Rex, Dallas James b. Diablo DQ, Von Blitzkrieg and Bound b. Troy and Nelson, Quicksilver Kerr Diamond Dan, Ian Rotten b. Pondo. January 13, Gaffney, South Carolina, Pro Wrestling Federation, 108, Sweet Brown Sugar b. Russian Assassin, Equalizer b. Hillbilly Willie, Baby Huey b. Red Demon, Scotty McKeever and George South b. Italian Stallion and Chris Hamrick DQ. Lethal Lottery had no winner. January 13, Brighton, Tennessee, American Wrestling Association, 236, Justin Williams b. Blade Boudreaux, Brian Collins Chris Gray, Bull Payne and Colodisco Kid, Bill Rush, be Spanish Fly and Bad News, David Haskins be Pain, Tommy Lane and Brad Dustin be Rebel Connection, Williams be Tim White, Danny be Goodker Black Jack Daniels. January 13th South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, ABWF, Billy Montana be CM Quick, Mike Mercedes be Glamour Boy, Black Terminator be Patriot, Not Del Wilkes Larry Santo and Bobby Hayes be Pain Master in Montana. January 13th Winnipeg, River City Wrestling, 280, Bobby Collins be Chad Ripley, Caveman Broda be Mr. Pink, Easy Rider be Bobby J. DQ, Brian Jewell be Brother Midnight, Models Incorporated be Steve Stryker and Robbie Hoyce to win RCW tag titles. January 14th Fitchburg, Massachusetts, WWF, 3,500 sellout, Duke Dries be Barry Horowitz, WWF tag titles, Smoking Guns be Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith, Undertaker be Yokozuna, Marty Jannetty be Bob Backlund, Skip and Zip be Aldo Montoya and Bob Holly 3/4 of a star, Savio Vega be Isaac Yonkem Dud, IC title, Hunter Hurst Helmsley be Razor Ramon DQ 1 star, Ahmed Johnson be Jeff Jarrett 1 1/2 star, Goldust be Henry Godwin 1 star, cage match for WWF title, Bret Hart be Diesel 2 1/4 stars. February 14 Tajimi, All Japan, 1100, Tsuyoshi Kikuchi be Masao Inoue, Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura and Mitsuo Momota D. Haruka Eigen and Masa Fuchi and Mighty Inoue 30 minutes, Atoru Asako be Manu Kia Mossman, Johnny Ace and Bobby Duncombe Jr. be Ryukaku Izumida and Tamon Honda, Stan Hansen and Gary Albright and Joel Deaton be the Patriot and the Eagle and the Lacrosse, Minoru Misawa and Kena Kobashi and Jun Akiyama be Yoshinari Ogawa and Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Tao 2218. February 14 Tokyo Korakuen Hall, JWP, 2,300 sellout, Bomber Hikari be Tomoko Miyaguchi, Uromiyagi be Toshie Uematsu, Tomoko Kuzumi and Chikeo Nagashima be Yuki Miyazaki and Kato, Shigusa Nagio and Cutie Suzuki and Devil Masami be Dynamite Kansai and Kaoru and Hikari Fukuoka 2213. February 14 Tokyo Korakuen Hall, Gia, 2,300 sellout, Tomoko Kuzumi and Chikeo Nagashima be Rieko Amano and Chihiro Nakano, Meiko Satomura and Hiromi Yagi be Tomoko Miyaguchi and Toshie Uematsu, Hikari Fukuoka and Cutie Suzuki and Mayumi Ozaki and Devil Masami and Meiki Amao and Kaoru be Hiromi Sugo and Saburo and Boyshoi Kid and Dynamite Kansai and Bomber Hikari and Chigusa Nagio. February 14 Inan, IWA, 1,800 Takeshi Sato be Daisuke Tao, Tudor the Turtle and Takashi Okano be Flying Kid Ichihara and Mitsunobu Kikuzawa, Tiger Jeet Singh be Keisuke Yamada, Cactus Jack and Keizo Matsuda be Headhunters, Tarzan Goto and Mr. Ganasuke be Leatherface and Shoji Nakamaki. February 14 Showa All Japan Women, 1,240, Misae Watanabe and Keo Nomi be Yoshiko Tamura and Mari Mogami, Yuka Shina be Mina Taniyama, Shaparita Asari and Yumi Fukawa be Kumiko Maikawa and Nobu Endo, Manami Toyota and Mariko Yoshida and Kaoru Ito be Takako Inoue and Tashio Yamada and Tomoko Watanabe, Yumiko Hata be Saki Hasegawa, Kyoko Inoue and Atsuko Mita be Asia Kong and Mima Shimoda. February 14 Kawagoe, LLPW Rumi Kazama and Kurula Harley Saito, be Mikiko Futagami and Yasha Kurenai, Shinobu Kandori be Carol Midori, Gen Yukari and Eagle Sawai be Mizuki Endo and Norio Tadano. February 14 Shigasaki, IWA No. 2 Demonio Uno be Takagi, Hercules No. 1 be Mummy DQ Uchu Majin Silver X be Black Mummy, Super Uchu Majin be Demonio Das, Bruiser Brian be Ryuma Go DQ Goro Tsurumi and Ultra 7, Masahiko Takasugi, D Scalper and Geezer, Silver X1 Battle Royal. Special thanks to Scott Hudson, Adam Pennison, Paul Hilken, David Rude, Ken McBride, Greg John, John Muse, Sarah Moore, Steve Dr. Lucha Sims, David Milliken, Dan Paris, Peggy Watkins, Rich Palladino, Jerry Lane, Jesse Money, Don Parker, Wayne Stanton. Japanese Television Rundown. February 4 New Japan. 1. Jushin Liger pinned Koji Kanemoto to win the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title. It was a great match, but it was hurt because the Dome is the worst place in the world to watch wrestling because of how poorly sound travels. Liger kept getting near falls using moves like 3 Fisherman Busters, a Brain Buster and a German suplex without the bridge. He also used a plancha off the top to the floor. Kanemoto took over when Liger missed a Frankensteiner off the top and hit a few moves for near falls until missing a moonsault. The two then did a sequence of blocking their standard moves. Kanemoto then used a Frankensteiner off the top, A Liger bomb and a moonsault for near falls and followed with a tiger suplex and a second moonsault before he missed a rolling senton. The finish saw Kanemoto kick out of 4 Liger bombs before Liger hit a move off the top which was basically a rolling senton. It was Liger's 7th IWGP Junior title win. 4 stars. 2. Kensuke Sasaki pinned Hiroshi Hashi with a Northern Lights bomb in Hashi's final match, at least for now. Hashi wasn't in his best shape, and when that happens with a guy who gets over mainly on his work, it means more than if a guy who gets over on charisma isn't in top shape. The two tried hard, but between the lack of crowd reaction and the somewhat sloppy execution, the match wasn't as good as you'd expect from these two. Unlike as reported here last week, Sasaki didn't wear the US title to the ring, which is probably a smart idea, as what would be the upside of calling attention to that situation? 1 3/4 stars. 3. Antonio Inoki made Big Van Vader submit to an armbreaker. This was the best match on the show. Inoki's ring entrance and the crowd reaction for it was among the greatest I've ever seen, starting off with a woman playing Inoki's theme music with a giant harp. Vader has put on a lot of weight. It's hard to estimate with someone that big, but if you told me 440, I'd say it could be legit. Given Inoki's age and Vader's weight, you'd think by looking at it that it wouldn't be that great. But it was. Both juiced. The psychology was incredible, the heat was great, and the work was stiff. Not a lot of fancy moves, but enough to get by. The highlight was Vader giving Inoki one of the most brutal German suplexes I've ever seen, and Inoki selling it like he was dead. I'd rate this match as similar in quality to the Flair-Vader match at Starrcade '93. Basically, after taking a horrible pounding, Inoki caught Vader coming off the ropes with a scoop slam and quickly used the arm breaker. 4 1/4 stars. 4. Riki Choshu made Masahito Kakihara submit to the Scorpion. Choshu didn't sell anything for Kakihara and pretty well embarrassed him, but it wasn't boring to watch. 1 star. 5. Nobuiko Takata won the IWGP Heavyweight title from Keiji Muto in 1714. Similar in quality to their first match. The first 5 minutes consisted of good mat wrestling back and forth. It slowed down from that point and even got boring until about the 11-minute mark. Like the first match, the last few minutes were excellent with stiff kicks and lots of submissions with rope breaks going back and forth with great heat. The highlight spot was Muto using a leg whip and going for the figure 4. The finish of their previous match, and Takata reversing it into a heel hold. But Muto reversing it into a figure 4 before they got to the ropes. Takata got the arm breaker, but Muto made the ropes. After several kicks, he got the arm breaker again for the submission. The strength of this television show were the pre-match features before every match building up to the story leading to the match. The weakness was that they cut away from every match almost the moment that the bell rang, so a lot of important post-match material after title switches, Hashi's speech with the fans teary-eyed, Inoki's celebration and the challenges to new champ Takata didn't air on television. By trying to cram too much wrestling into the show, they limited the impact of the wrestling they were showing. 3 3/4 stars. EMLO Juan Herrera officially turned down the booking job, so Mano Negra is the sole booker. It's said that anyone from this group who work a show for Herrera won't be allowed back, with the biggest names leaving appearing to be Los Destructors, Shu El Guerrero Mississippi 1 and Blue Demon Jr., all of whom will wind up with AAA. Shu was scheduled in a mask versus hair match with Huracan Sevilla on February 14 at Arena Azteca Budokan in Mexico City. Vampiro Canadiense got the lead role in an upcoming television soap opera which stars Gloria Trevi, the leading female rock star in Mexico. Conan also has a role on the show. There's talk they are going to give Vampiro a major push as a new soap heartthrob type. Inside the ring, the crowds were said to be marginally better than the horrible houses last week, with the major focus being on a push for Shocker. In the February 12 main event at Arena Coliseo, Shocker and Atlantis and Hector Garza beat Emilio Charles Jr. and Negro Casas and Apollo Dantes, with Shocker scoring the third fall win. It appears they are building up for Casas defending the welterweight belt against Shocker. AAA. Several new angles of the first television show taped in 1996, which took place on February 12 in Nezahualcóyotl, before a sellout 3,000 with another 2,000 turned away at the door for the second straight full house. They also had a sellout of 3,250 in Mexico City at Deportivo Oceania on February 13 for the second straight Saturday night sellout in that building. The first television match from February 12 saw Los Cadetes de Espacio face the two remaining members of Los Diabolicos, Mr. Condor and Marabunta, along with Duende and UWA wrestlers Bronco and Rocky Santana. The third Diabolico, Angel Mortal, will be out of action for a long time as he was involved in a serious out-of-the-ring beating while he was home over the Christmas break. Mortal was an enforcer type before getting into wrestling. In the match, Condor had Thunderbird pinned when Marabunta ran in overeager and began kicking the hell out of Discovery, which caused a DQ. The two ended up arguing and brawling to break up their partnership, although it wasn't apparent which one was turning. Next was a Mexican tag team title match for the held-up titles with Juventud Guerrera and Psicosis taking on Volador and El Mexicano. Juventud and his father Fuerza held the titles, and of course Fuerza has left to join Promel and is no longer on speaking terms with his son since his son returned to AAA. There's actually quite a bit behind the scenes on this one. Since Mexican national titles aren't owned by the promotion, but are supposedly controlled by the commission, they had a hearing for Fuerza to explain why he wasn't going to be there for the title defense. Fuerza was actually booked on a show in Tijuana that night for Rey Mysterio and came to the hearing with Blue Panther, while Octagon, AAA union leader, and Mascara Sagrada, AAA programmer, were at the meeting representing AAA. At the meeting, on the record, while an argument ensued between the two sides, Panther and Fuerza mentioned that it was Octagon's idea originally for them to form a new group and leave, and how Sagrada was with them, so why were they acting so bitter now at Fuerza and Panther for leaving? The meeting was a bitter blow for Antonio Pena, because while it was rumored that Octagon and Sagrada might leave and that Octagon was with the Promel group but changed his mind, Pena never knew it for sure until this came out publicly, and it kind of broke his heart because Sagrada was the first gimmick he created when he was EMLL booker, and Octagon was the first superstar he created. Anyway, in the tag title match, which was said to be 4.5 stars, Guerrero was pinned in the third fall, leaving Psicosis against both faces, which makes great sense psychologically if you think about it, and he pinned both of them. Psicosis did a moonsault off the top to the floor on Mexicano, and Psicosis destroyed Volador in the ring with a maneuver which caused him to be stretchered out. In the major angle of the show, they were giving proclamations to Rey Mendoza. By the way, on Televisa this weekend was an ancient movie called Santo vs. Los Villanos del Ring, and the team captain of the team called Los Villanos was Mendoza, which probably explains where the current Villanos, who are all sons of Mendoza, got their name, and the original Blue Demon, who were two of the biggest legends in Mexican mat history. In something out of the US playbook, but that apparently has never been done before in Mexico, Pierre Jr., who was being pushed as the lead heel, ripped up the certificate and started shoving the 70-ish Demon. Blue Demon Jr., who jumped earlier in the week, ran in to protect his father but ended up getting destroyed. Later in the main event, after La Parca and Octagon and Mascara Sagrada won by a DQ over Pierre Jr. and Pentagon and Killer for excessive roughness, Demon Jr. attacked the heels, who destroyed him once again. Apparently the heat in the building was incredible because disrespecting wrestling legends like Pierre did is something foreign to this wrestling world. Conan has another northern tour this week with the major shows on February 18 in Tijuana, and they'll return to Tijuana on February 24 with Rey Mysterio Jr. vs. Psicosis for the WWA welterweight title, and Conan and Parca and Octagon vs. Pierre and Pentagon and KGB. Super Luchas magazine named Conan as Wrestler of the Year, Parca as Best Babyface, Cien Caras as Best Heel, Juventud Guerrera as Most Improved, and Pero Aguayo Jr. as Rookie of the Year for this promotion. Mysterio Jr. and Psicosis will be touring Japan for War from February 12 to February 22. Absolutely no word on a rescheduled date for Chicago or for any future shows in the US. My guess is there won't be anything in Los Angeles until the Inoki show in May. The Moreno family is leaving the EMLL fold along with Juan Herrera and helping this group. A key deal to that is that Ultimo Dragon is part of the family, and he was at a combined show in Naucalpan over the weekend, and said he was finally quitting EMLL. Dragon said that he wouldn't be going to ECW because he's in too much pain to do what would be necessary to get over there. He's got so many injuries now at 29, from all the craziness of his youth, that he looks at wrestling as a business and feels he can probably last one more year in Japan before he'll take it easy and work a toned-down style in Mexico. Paul Heyman saw a tape of the July 7th Dragon vs. Chris Jericho match of the year from Japan and was interested in bringing them in as a feud. Japan. The main event for the February 28 Pancrase pay-per-view taping was changed, as Boss Rutan either broke his finger or his wrist. I've heard differing reports, so he'll be out of action. Rutan was scheduled to defend his Pancrase World title against Frank Shamrock, so the title will be vacant, with Shamrock facing Minoru Suzuki for the title and the winner then giving the first title defense to Rutan. Pancrase's Yusuke Fuke will change his ring name to Takaku Fuke. The pay-per-view show will have the announcing done live in Japan rather than voiceovers in the US, but still not sure of the announcing team, which is one of the most important components of getting a new style over to an audience unfamiliar with it. Not a lot of major All-Japan news as they are in the middle of a tour. The only title match this past week was February 12 in Takamatsu, where Yoshinari Ogawa retained the PWF Junior title, beating Rex King, former WWF wrestler Timothy Well. The next tour will be February 17 to March 2 with the final show the first Budokan of 1996. Bobby Bradley Jr. from Southern California makes his debut on this tour and will probably form an underneath team with Rob Van Dam. The two tag together in the now defunct Las Vegas-based NWC. The other regular foreigners on the tour will be Stan Hansen, Gary Albright, The Patriot, Johnny Ace, Doug Furness, Dan Crawford, Abdullah the Butcher and Giant Kimala too. New Japan's December 23 television show did a 1.7 rating. The Nielsen rating for the February 4 special was 11.6, while the video research rating, which is the primary rating source in Japan, Nielsen is basically the secondary source, was 10.1 as listed last week. The biggest house shows of the week were an FMW show and a Michinoku show. The FMW show on February 10 in Chiba before a sellout 3,100 had a no-rope spider mat double hell deathmatch main event with Mitsuhiro Matsunaga and Wing Kanemura and Haido over Hayabusa and Masato Tanaka and Koji Nakagawa. Because of all the craziness Hayabusa has been doing trying to get over as a new star with this group, he's totally banged up with injuries to his left elbow, left eye, left shoulder, and left knee and will be undergoing surgery to fix some of his messed up parts and return in March. They had two interesting interpromotional women's matches on the undercard, with the Outsiders winning both Chigusa Nagio pinning Megumi Kudo, and Asia Kong pinning Combat Toyota. Michinoku Pro drew 5,070 in Sapporo on February 17 for a street fight main event as Giant Zebra, a character from the original Tiger Mask cartoon series in the comic book and cartoon. Giant Zebra was actually Shohei Baba, but in this case it's Kenji Takano, and Great Sasuke beat Mr. Pogo and Grand Naniwa. Some of the Michinoku wrestlers will change their ring names on the next tour. Sato is now Dick Togo, Terry Boy is Men's Tao and Shiryu is now Tokyo Jin. In war news, Inichiro Tenryu issued a challenge to Nobuiko Takata for the Iwgp heavyweight title. Tenryu said he was only going to wrestle about 20 times in 1996 as he turns 46 this year and it is hurting and picking his spots. That's the main reason the company is being built around Hiromichi Fuyuki as the top guy rather than Tenryu. On the next tour, which begins February 23, Tenryu will wrestle at Korakuen Hall and one other show but not on the rest of the shows. On the tour will be Big Titan, Lance Storm and Abuda Dine, Rocky Aokiya, as the foreigners. Mr. Pogo is working only the Korakuen Hall show in a 6-man XFMW Pogo and Titan and Battle Ranger vs Fuyuki and Geto and Jado match but not the rest of the tour. Ryuma Go is running shows February 16 at Korakuen Hall and February 18 in Osaka with Go and Koji Kiao vs Bruiser Bryan and Billy Jack Haynes and February 18 in Osaka with Go and Jesse Barr defending the Kusa tag titles against Haynes and Bryan. Further bad news for Americans looking for work in Japan is the apparent lack of interest of IWA in booking foreign talent. It has been rumored since the final tour of 1995 that IWA would cut back on foreigners and that booker Victor Quiñones would be leaving. On the February 2 to February 7 tour, they won't be having any foreigners, and the fact that Cactus Jack and Headhunters were both looking for full-time work in the US seems to be a second indication that this may be a permanent deal. The owners of the group think they can feud Tarzan Goto with ancient Japanese names like Great Kabuki and Umanosuke Ueda and save the trans costs of flying Americans over and still draw just as well. Hunters did lots of jobs on the current tour, which ended on February 15 in Yamato, near Tokyo. On that show, Goto and Mr. Ganasuke kept their NWA tag team belts beating Tiger Jeet Singh and Ueda, which was a legendary team in the late 70s and early 80s. They did a major angle after the match where Ueda and Goto brawled backstage and Ueda pulled out a knife on Goto. Goto left, but came back with a fork and they basically carved each other up to set up a February 5 match in Chiba with a knife versus fork match, where I guess the winner gets possession of a spoon as well and then can sit down to a nice dinner. The feud actually began on February 2 at Korakuen Hall when Singh and Ueda both attacked Tarzan's wife Despina Goto, former American woman wrestler Despina Montaguez. The main event on the February 15 show was Cactus Jack and Shoji Nakamaki vs Great Kabuki and Benkei in a broken glass match and wound up with Goto breaking glass over Benkei's head and he juiced and leading to Kabuki challenging him to a singles match on February 2 at Korakuen Hall. Ueda managed Singh the entire recent tour but the 55-year-old Ueda only worked the final night in the ring. JWP and Gia did an afternoon/evening deal at Korakuen Hall on February 14 with the groups combining talent on both shows and selling the place out twice. Dynamite Kansai had a JWP title defense which only went 151 before she pinned Hikari Fukuoka with the Splash Mountain on February 11 at Kagoshima. Kansai was involved in an auto accident when her taxi was crashed into by a garbage truck from behind on February 7 coming home from Korakuen Hall, and she was injured, which probably explains why the match was so short. Battler's promotion debuted on February 13 at Korakuen Hall before a sellout house. The Battler's guys are the remnants from the defunct Pro Wrestling Fujiwara Gumi Shoot group, and the main event saw Yuki Ishikawa and Shoichi Funaki over Daisuke Ikeda and Katsumi Yujuda. The style is a combination shoot submission style in the ring and chair-throwing brawling style outside the ring. Michinoku Pro and FMW each sent tag matches to the debut show, as Battler's is sending its wrestlers to work with both groups. Koji Ishiriki, a popular former sumo wrestler who worked for a few years as a pro wrestler mainly for the old SWS, before getting married to a woman wrestler and both retiring from wrestling, will return for Takashi Ishikawa's Tokyo Pro Wrestling on March 22. Ishiriki, now 34 and former LLPW wrestler Utako Hozumi, who was pushed as kind of a sex symbol type in LLPW, have been running a snack bar business since leaving wrestling. USWA after another weak house on February 10, less than 800 fans paying $5,500, it was all sorts of turns and title changes. On the February 10 show, Jerry Lawler beat Tex Slazenger to win the USWA title, and Lady Satan, Eddie Combs Under a Hood, beat Miss Texas to win the women's title. Then on the February 14 television show in Memphis, PG-13 won the tag titles from Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert, and Rich came back and beat Lawler for the USWA title. In the process of all this, Slazenger turned babyface and Rich and Gilbert went heel, managed by Scott Bowden, leading to the February 16 Memphis show, back to Monday night because the Mid-South Coliseum had a prior booking on Wednesday, having Lawler and Slazenger headlining against Rich and Gilbert. The television show was the best in several weeks. It started off with Rich and Gilbert defending the USWA tag titles against PG-13. All four worked as aggressive babyfaces. The finish saw Gilbert come off the top rope with a chain, but Wolfie D moved and ended up hitting Rich, who was pinned for the fall. Rich and Gilbert argued after but ended up patching things up. Bowden and Slazenger then came out for an interview holding both the old Southern title belt and the USWA title belt, which they stole after Lawler won the match on February 10. Bowden was running off his mouth about possession being September 10th of the law when Slazenger told him to stop it. Slazenger called Lawler out and gave him both belts. Bowden went crazy and fired him, but he said that he quit and then pulled Bowden's pants down. Slazenger at first couldn't get them down, so he pulled harder and wound up pulling too hard, because he got his underwear as well. Bowden fell on his stomach with his shirt covering his butt on the floor and then pulled his underwear up while on his stomach. Then came a battle royal with the winner to get a title shot at Lawler on the same show, with Rich winning the battle royal, throwing out Jesse James Armstrong. During the title match, Gilbert interfered and hit Lawler with a chain, which Rich didn't see, and Rich pinned Lawler to win the title. Andrea Calloway, showed up on television back as manager of the Rock and Roll Express. Andrea is Ricky Morton's girlfriend who was in the middle of the mess that got Morton fired from SMW over the summer when Andrea pressed charges against both Tracy Smothers and his fiancée Angela Lambert when Lambert allegedly beat her up. I believe the end result was that Calloway dropped all legal and civil charges against both Smothers and Lambert, and in exchange, Lambert paid Calloway's medical bills from the fight. Then came a pretty hot scenario involving Lawler, Gilbert, and Rich. Lawler got hot at Gilbert for costing him the USWA title, but Gilbert blamed Lawler for costing him the tag team title, which Lawler had nothing to do with. Lawler couldn't understand what he was talking about, and Gilbert then said how mad he was at Lawler because Lawler would never do anything for anyone, and said he was so mad at Lawler from what he found out the night before that he lost the tag title earlier that day. The storyline is that Gilbert talked about them doing a memorial show for Eddie Gilbert on February 3 in Philadelphia and how Lawler turned down doing the show. In actuality, Lawler will be appearing on the show. Gilbert said that Lawler had forgotten everything and Eddie and Doug had done for him. Lawler said the problem is that the promoter of the show is Dennis Corraluzzo, who he called a shyster who came to Memphis claiming that Lawler had 2 illegitimate children in Philadelphia, one of whom was Fred the Elephant Boy from Howard Stern in an angle several years back. Lawler then said he remembered everything Eddie and Doug had done to him and brought up several angles over the years, most notable of them when Eddie smashed up his car windshield with a baseball bat and when Eddie ran him over with a car, and mentioned how Doug was in the car when that happened and said he wouldn't do a memorial show for Eddie anyway. Rich then came out and said that if it wasn't for people like himself and Eddie Gilbert, that Lawler wouldn't even still be around. Lawler then brought up the 1987 angle where Rich hid under the ring and cost him the hair match against Austin Idol and how Rich and Idol posted his crotch later that year. Lawler then walked off and both jumped him. Bowden then did an interview saying how glad he was that Rich and Gilbert had regained their killer instinct and called Slazenger out to make it a 3-on-1 beating, but naturally Slazenger ended up making the save. The February 15 show had Bowden vs. Downtown Bruno, King Cobra vs. Jesse James Armstrong, Tracy Smothers vs. Spellbinder, Satan defending against Texas, PG-13 defending the tag titles against Rock and Roll Express, Coco Ware, all blown up and now in the 250 to 260 pound range, versus Brian Christopher in a chain match and the tag main event. ECW no house shows over the past weekend. Upcoming lineups are February 26 in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania with Sandman defending the ECW title against Mr. Hughes, Cactus Jack and Mikey Whipwreck defending the tag titles against Dances with Dudley and Bubba Ray Dudley, Sabu vs. Jimmy Del Rey, Shane Douglas vs. Stevie Richards, Tommy Dreamer and Pitbulls vs. Two Cold Scorpio and Eliminators, Taz vs. Hackmeyers plus debut of Headhunters. February 27 at ECW Arena has Sandman defending the ECW title against Raven, Jack and Whipwreck defending against Dreamer and a mystery partner, Scorpio defends TV title against Del Rey, Sabu vs. Rob Van Dam, Pitbulls vs. Gangstas No DQ, Hughes vs. Myers plus Headhunters, Taz, Bubba Ray, Eliminators, and Douglas. February 3 in Queens, New York will be Sandman and Scorpio vs. Gangstas, Rey Mysterio Jr. vs. Psychosis, Raven and Richards vs. Dreamer and Mystery Partner and the debut of Chris Jericho. They also have a show on February 2 in Reading, Pennsylvania. Seriously, if you're planning on attending the January 27th or February 3 show, order reserved seats in advance now. You'll be glad you did in the long run. These shows will almost surely overflow and will have brawling all over the place, and there are many disadvantages: long lines, not being able to see, possibly being turned away at the door, of buying GA tickets when you arrive at the building. There may be attempts in New York to work the fans into negative chants toward Philadelphia in a way to build up a New York versus Philadelphia feud, similar to what they attempted earlier in the year of Philadelphia versus Florida. Heyman was threatening to sue WCW over a hotline message where Terry Taylor said the ECW champion was a drug addict. Here and there. Antonio Inoki held a press conference on January 11 in Los Angeles and changed the date of his planned multi-promotion show from March 3 to May 18. No site was announced, but Inoki mentioned both the Los Angeles Sports Arena and even the Coliseum. Now they're really out of their minds as potential sites. The press conference was 1 hour and 40 minutes, mainly showing tapes to get Inoki over. The only media covering the event was Japanese and Spanish language. Inoki said he would be inviting EMLL, AAA, All Japan, New Japan, WWF and WCW to participate, and said this wasn't a political deal, so there would be no inter-promotional matches. Inoki didn't announce any of the matches or his opponent, although Inoki had approached Big Van Vader about headlining the show against him. Antonio Pena, KGB and Jesse Hernandez were also there. Pena indicated that the AAA match on the show would be an 8-man barbed wire match. Toys R Us and Nintendo have already signed on as sponsors for the show. In what was supposedly a pay-per-view taping on January 5 at the Dallas Sportatorium before 2,600 fans, the largest crowd since CWA opened up, but virtually all paper, like 2,500 of the 2,600, since more than 20,000 free tickets were given away all over Dallas. They did a 1-hour main event. The deal was a football rules match with 4 15-minute quarters, with a pin counting as 7 points touchdown, a DQ as 3 points, field goal, and a save as 1 point extra point. It was supposed to be Jake Roberts' team of babyfaces against Skander Akbar's heels. Jake wasn't there because his wife went into false labor, so they got Ivan Putski to take his place. It ended up being High Voltage, Bo Vegas and Devin Michaels, and Scott Putski and Mark Valiant and Steve Cox and Dom Minaldi, a friend of the guys who are supposedly putting this on pay-per-view, winning over Chip the Firebreaker and Rod Price and John Hawk and Sean Summers and Alex Porto and Guido Falcone. Apparently Minaldi was supposed to be the world's toughest bodyguard who had little or no pro wrestling experience, and the heels took it upon themselves to give him an introduction to pro wrestling filled with potatoes. I heard they had decent heat for the first half, but when they came back after a halftime break that lasted 40 minutes, it really dragged in. There were only about 400 there for the finish. The match ended up as a 20-20 tie after the hour, and they went into a sudden death, and naturally Minaldi scored the winning pin. The people who were running the show were a group supposedly out of Northern California called MPP Bodyguards, and said it would air on pay-per-view on February 2, although I'm skeptical of any widespread clearance since there has been no advertising out that I've seen and we're only a few weeks away. Also in CWA news, Ryumago from Japan appears on the January 26th show while Black Bart is moving back to Texas from the Carolinas. He had been doing WCW jobs as Big Train Bart, so he'll be back. Ray Mancini was a guest celeb at the pay-per-view show, but Ken Norton Sr., several Dallas Cowboys whose names weren't mentioned, Chuck Norris and Lord Al Hayes, who now lives in the Dallas area with family members after leaving Connecticut after the Titan gig ran out, who were also billed as appearing, weren't there. Angel of Death did the color. Peach State Wrestling on March 6 in Cordell, Georgia has Bob Armstrong and R.D. Swain and Ray Lloyd versus Scott and Steve Armstrong and French Angel, Frank Morel. Scott and Steve are heels in Cordell. Also Billy Black versus Too Cold Scorpio with Ted Oates as referee plus Jimmy Del Rey, Jerry Oates, and Adam Bomb. Observer readers get $1 off at the gate. The After Mag Sports Review Wrestling has folded. The ABC TV show Step by Step did a wrestling storyline on January 12 where Patrick Duffy and his son on the show ended up wrestling against two women wrestlers, played by former indie wrestlers Spice Williams and Charlie Haynes, for tickets to the Super Bowl. Billy Jack Haynes and Jimmy Snuka, as the heel, had their first singles match for Sandy Barr's group on January 7 after breaking up as a team over the holidays. Get well wishes to Andy Nichols. At the house show on January 13 in Compton, California, main event Bobby Bradley Jr. and Phobia vs. Pilato Suicida and Rey Mysterio. They honored Mysterio for 20 years of pro wrestling. For whatever it is worth, UWFI in Japan is still paying Billy Robinson, Gene Leidick and Billy Scott for training in Nashville. Robinson has been raving about Scott, saying he's ready for shoot matches and could be anyone short of Gracie. UFC The final competitor in the February 16 pay-per-view tournament will be Jerry Bolander, a Ken Shamrock student from Northern California who will be one of the Davids, 5'11", 200, facing Goliath John Hess, 6'8", 295, in the first round. All I know about Bolander is that he was a former high school wrestler who has been training with Shamrock since July and did a shoot fight in November in Honolulu which he won. He hasn't wrestled for Pancrase yet, although he may at some point. The first round has already been put together and hopefully we'll get that by next week's issue. UFC announcer Don Wilson, a former multi-time world champion in kickboxing and considered in his prime as one of the best kickboxers, and now a video action movie star, regardless of weight, in the world in some circles, had spoken to Shamrock about training with him to prepare for an upcoming UFC, although nothing is definite on that. The 2020 piece on UFC is scheduled for sometime in February. Shamrock will have a match on the January 28 Pancrase show in Yokohama, which is less than 3 weeks before the match with Chemo. In preparing for Dan Severn, Shamrock canceled his Pancrase matches leading up to the match. Although 5 of the 8 competitors in the next tournament are pretty much unknowns, I suspect some of the Goliaths are going to do pretty well. While UFC has shown that a skilled small man can beat men of virtually any size, unless you have a Hoist Gracie type, it's awfully hard to beat a good man that has a 100-pound weight advantage. I suspect the matches on this show to be wilder and much shorter, with size playing more of a factor and technique less of a factor. If one of the unknowns has great skill, and Joe Moreira, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu representative, has a reputation, they'll make a name for themselves. Of those who have been in UFCs before, Joel Sutton has done 2 alternate matches. I believe he was very lucky to beat Geza Coleman Jr., stopped on blood, and if it had gone another minute Coleman probably would have beaten him, in Buffalo, so I don't see him as a giant killer. Paul Verlins has so much size and enough ability to beat any small guy unless they are really tough and highly skilled. John Hess is kind of an unknown but pretty much was a wild swinger who showed little technique in his one win in Charlotte before not going on because his wild swinging did damage to his hands. UFC was featured on the Ron Owens radio show on KGO, which is the most listened to radio show in Northern California, on January 10. Senator John McCain didn't appear, so Bob Merowitz did a quick interview at the onset and they took calls without Merowitz for the rest of the hour. Merowitz usually does a good job in these situations, which is a contrast to most pro wrestling promoters put under the gun in stressful situations who usually end up making things worse for themselves. Owens had never seen a UFC and his knowledge of it, great job of background research, consisted of reading the pro/con editorials several weeks back in USA Today, and a negative article amidst all the media controversy in the San Francisco Examiner. The callers were about 75% pro-UFC, which is surprising since the nature of this type of scenario would be for reactionary callers to have vitriolic hatred based on what they hadn't seen. Nevertheless, Owens did ask for people who had seen the event to call, and most of those were positive. All but 1 or 2 of the negative calls came from people who had never seen it. WCW. Monday Night Raw results from the Night Center in Miami on January 15, before 4,200 fans, 3,100 paying $30,000, saw Lex Luger beat Randy Savage with the torture rack in 5:09, 1 1/2 star. A lot of crowd heat, with most cheering Luger. Neither looked very good in the ring, though. Next was supposed to be Kevin Sullivan and Hugh Morris vs. Arnold Anderson and Brian Pillman. However, the entire Dungeon of Doom and Four Horsemen came out and said they all had a common plan and it served no purpose to fight among themselves. Kevin Sullivan said he respected Ric Flair and Arnold Anderson, but called Brian Pillman a punk. Pillman made some faces and Anderson slapped Pillman in the face really hard, and they seemed to tease that Chris Benoit was mad at Anderson when he slapped Pillman. There is already talk of breaking up the Horsemen. Not that they were ever together to begin with. It was a great skit, but the lone negative was by having Giant out there with Gang. It exposed that Giant isn't nearly as large as they make him out to be because he only had a few inches on Gang. Whatever problems Bischoff had which caused him to nearly fire Pillman on the air the previous week seemed to have been worked out. Public Enemy debuted and beat American Males in 3:24 when Johnny Grunge pinned Marcus Bagwell, 1 star. A few fans recognized PE and danced with them, and there was a very brief ECW chant during the match that almost immediately died out. Match had no heat and virtually everything in the match was mistimed. The only highlight was after the match when Rocco Rock did a somersault off the top rope outside the ring and put Bagwell through 2 tables, which got a nice pop. In the poll, PE got more first-place votes than any other team for Tag Team of the Year. The Males placed for Worst Tag Team. And the Males are tons better workers than PE. Flair pinned Sting in 13:35 when Luger came out to confront Jimmy Hart, got the megaphone from him, and inadvertently a Sting came in for the Stinger Splash. Sting hit the megaphone and was KO'd and pinned, 3.5 stars. Very good match, very good heat, very clever finish. But do you know the other end of the coin? It's the same stuff we've seen a million times. Hogan, Savage and Sting did an interview with Hogan and Savage telling Sting that Luger cost him the match. Sting left to ask Luger, and then Hogan asked Savage to give up his title match since he lost 4 in a row to Luger and he was in a slump and Hogan was on a roll. They ended up arguing. This has probably changed, or if not changed, somewhat reworked, but there at one point was a plan for a Hogan-Savage breakup at the Clash in Las Vegas. Hogan then pinned Meng in 4:38 after getting the foreign object from Kevin Sullivan and using it on Meng DUD. Crowd was pretty dead for this one. Some changes for the February 11 St. Pete pay-per-view show. The Flair-Savage title match will now be inside a cage. Dean Malenko vs. Eddie Guerrero was pulled from the show as apparently both will be doing the February New Japan tour, and Alex Wright vs. Disco Inferno will be put in the spot. Besides the Monday numbers, for the weekend of January 6th, WCW Saturday Night did a 2.5, Pro did a 1.7 and Main Event also did a 1.7, so it was WCW's biggest weekend in recent memory, again partially due to the blizzard. For cumulative ratings for the week ending December 31st, WCW got a 6.1 rating on 173 stations, or 5.83 million homes in total viewing all of WCW programming. The WWF numbers are unavailable because they were so low they were off the top 20 charts, under 4.7, largely because Raw was preempted on December 25th. A few more notes regarding the Hogan extortion case. All the pub appears to have been a preemptive strike by Hogan's attorneys as they sent out press releases to the media to get their version of the story out. In the St. Paul Pioneer Press, Peter Johnson, the lawyer Hogan sued, said, "My client was sexually assaulted by Hulk Hogan. She described a very serious sexual assault. I have no reason not to believe her. She is very persuasive." The newspaper later said the lawsuit by Hogan backfired because it turned a quiet dispute into a very public battle. Johnson's firm also claimed it was inconsistent for Hogan to file the suit if one of his concerns, as stated in the lawsuit, was for the claims to go public and cause problems with his family and his career as an entertainer. In response to the claim that there was a double standard because Mike Graham, Dustin Rhodes and Blacktop Bully were fired for blood in the truck match and that neither Ric Flair, who got juice on pay-per-view, and Hulk Hogan, who did so at a house show a few weeks before Rhodes and Bully were fired for the same basic thing. Bischoff said that Graham, Rhodes and Bully were fired for doing what he told them not to do. He said that WCW has no policy regarding blood, but that blood won't appear on television. If someone is cut or decides to creatively get exciting inside the ring, it doesn't matter, Bischoff said in the Dayton Daily News. The director knows he can't shoot it for TBS and TNT. On pay-per-view, everybody turns up the intensity a notch or two. From time to time, stuff happens. Dan Severn was at the WCW offices on January 11th. He was offered no specific role or concrete amount of money, but WCW expressed interest in him. All the wrestlers now have to leave the belts with company officials after television tapings rather than carry the belts with them. WCW is paranoid after the Medusa situation of a retaliation taking place. January 10th at center stage before an overflow crowd of 800 saw the Flair-Savage title match that aired on January 13th. Match was average, as Hogan attacked Jimmy Hart, who is apparently Flair's manager at least for this week but not Luger's manager, or is he? Anderson did a run-in and hit Savage with knucks and Flair pinned him. Hogan showed the ref the knucks and he reversed the decision. The Giant ran in and went after Hogan and Savage, but again Zodiac stopped him. Hogan and Savage then promised a secret weapon at the Clash. I've got no idea who it is. Roddy Piper had called about doing something several weeks back, but it being him would be purely speculation at best. Also, Eddie Guerrero pinned Benoit in a 3-stars match when Pillman's interference backfired. Men at Work beat Bunkhouse Buck and Dick Slater in a match that wasn't bad. Anderson beat Bubba Rogers. BK Wall Street interfered to help Bubba, but Jim Duggan ran out and taped up Anderson's fist and he KO'd Bubba with it. One-man gang wearing the U.S. belt beat Giant Ninja Ron Race in a match well beyond any traditional standards of awful. Alex Wright beat Dean Malenko via DQ 2 1/4 stars. Harlem Heat beat Sting and Lex Luger via DQ in a title match when Luger threw Stevie Ray over the top rope 2 stars. Dallas Page pinned Steve Armstrong. In a match between Steve Regal and Dusty Wolfe, David Finlay ran in and destroyed Regal. Finlay got a great babyface reaction. He's wearing a Northern Ireland jacket, so this looks to be an England versus Northern Ireland feud. Nevertheless, as he was pounding on Regal, the crowd was chanting USA. Johnny B. Bad kept the TV title against Meng when Page interfered and Bad pinned Page and the ref counted the fall. Sting and Luger beat Barrio Brothers. Joey Maggs beat Wall Street via DQ for refusing to break on the ropes. Teddy Long came in to help Maggs and Wall Street left him laying. Craig Pittman then did a run-in and Wall Street left him lying. After all was said and done, Pittman asked Long to manage him and Long said okay. This was a mess live. They either did it wrong or had to do a retake, so they made Maggs, who had left the scene, go back into the ring and lay down like he was laid out as they reshot the skit, all this taking place in front of the incredulous fans. Road Warrior Hawk then beat Kurosawa, finally settling that heated grudge, and beat Fidel Sierra. Stephen Wright, the father of Alex, who was one of the great scientific wrestlers of his era, was at the show as a Germany television company was doing a feature on Alex. The Gang Sasaki title match aired on January 13th with, as expected, the clip cutting off as Gang grabbed the belt. WCW has cut way back on budget for jobber expenses at the next Orlando tapings, so they will be using far more local guys and giving them hoods to make them appear to be different characters as they work more often. Mike Tenay is supposed to be doing the announcing during the Clash for the Conan vs. Psychosis match. After all the panic about wanting Conan to send video of himself and Psychosis, like they don't already own footage from a pay-per-view show they did themselves, but I'll bet nobody even thought of that, and it being sent, you've seen what a great job they've done of getting them over. The initial crowd response to Public Enemy, when all but a small percentage, most at ringside, had any idea who they were, maybe even worse for those two in Las Vegas. On WCW Saturday Night, Mike Ditka said he'd manage Steve McMichael when he leaves broadcasting and starts wrestling as if it were fact. Naturally on Monday, the idea McMichael would become a wrestler wasn't WWF. Mentioned. Raw highlights were a great video feature on Shawn Michaels and a great hallway brawl with Razor Ramon and Goldust. Despite everyone claiming Jim Cornette has nothing to do with booking, his DNA was all over the Ramon Goldust angle, complete with them brawling out of the building and the heel getting into his car and driving off as the face throws something at the car. The brawl was much stiffer than you'd expect from WWF or anyone else for that matter. Other parts of the show really reeked of desperation. Vince McMahon had to read what sounded like a lawyer's statement that Goldust doesn't represent the gay community and that the subject matter is harassment. Geez, and I thought they were portraying the worst imaginative homophobia to the nth degree. But I also thought the Gangstas in SMW was playing on racism, but it had nothing to do with that. It was all about the fact that lots of whites hate blacks and that maybe that would sell wrestling tickets. They also did a spot where Sonny was wearing a very low-cut top and bent over as much as possible under the guise of shooting pool. What was last week's slogan? Oh yeah, nothing artificial here. A second spot saw her in a bubble bath implying she'd had sex for the past hour. Hey, it works on silk stockings. 123 Kid has been in physical therapy for a hip injury and missed the entire last tour, but will be back for the Rumble. Sid suffered a neck injury on December 9th and it got progressively worse. After the Nassau Coliseum show, he was pulled from the semi-main and moved to a prelim match in New Haven where he was asked to put over his friend Bob Holly, which he did, and then left. The boys all, or many, came to the conclusion that his injury was a work and he left over being asked to put Holly over in a prelim singles match. He's supposed to be out of action for 8 weeks. There may have been contact with WCW either from him or WCW also believing that he was gone from WWF and talking about bringing him in, but because of past problems, WCW decided not to pursue the situation. House shows over the past week did pretty well. January 8th in Burlington, Vermont drew a sellout and $28,000. January 9th in Cornwall, ONT drew $1,822,000 Canadian. January 10th in Hull, K drew $3,748,000 Canadian. January 11th in Drummondville, K was cancelled due to a poor advance. January 12th in Montreal for the final show at the Forum drew $10,016-8,000 of which was paid for $138,000 Canadian. January 13th in Bangor, Maine drew $3,044,000 and January 14th in Fitchburg, Massachusetts drew a sellout $3,400 and more than $40,000 with the show selling out hours ahead of time. A correction on the January 7th Albany crowd from last week, it was actually about $4,766,000. Lots of notes out of the Montreal show. They shot an angle after Smoking Guns beat Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith. Raymond Rougeau, who did the In the Stands ring announcing, tried to interview them after the match. Hart started insulting the Rougeau family and said that Quebec should have done everyone a favor and separated from Canada. As Rougeau walked away in disgust, Hart ambushed him and beat the hell out of him. This no doubt sets up a Hart vs. Rougeau match for the August 2nd wrestling debut in the new 24,000-seat Molson Center. Jean-Pierre Lafitte, who has been out of action since November after undergoing hernia surgery, was asked by Montreal promoter Joanne Rougeau, sister of Jacques and Raymond, about the rumor of him joining Jacques in WCW. Jacques had tried all week to conclude his deal with WCW so he could get it in all the local newspapers to steal the thunder from the WWF show, but the deal wasn't put together in time. Pierre told Joanne that he had a WCW offer after his WWF contract expires in July, but he had agreed to no deal. He said he'd prefer to stay with WWF and wished all the Quebec connection would bury the hatchet and stay with WWF, but said WCW is talking guaranteed money and he has to look out for his family. Jacques claimed the WWF angle with Raymond was a sign of desperation. Raymond made a point of telling people that unlike Jacques, he never said he was retiring and never had a retirement show. Most of the big houses were drawn for Bret vs. Diesel cage matches. Same finish where Bret climbs over the top a split second before Diesel goes out the door. In some cities they announce Diesel as champ before reversing it, and Diesel is then told to hand the belt to Bret, and he clocks Bret over the head with it. In most cities, the crowds are about 50-50 rather than cheering Diesel, and some cities Bret is getting more cheers. Joanne Rougeau's son, Dennis Gautier Jr., whose father wrestled in Montreal in the 70s, was a member of the Canadian junior hockey team that won the Junior World Championships that ended on January 4th. Also at the Montreal show, a member of the Canadians, whose name I didn't get, but he's a goon type but wasn't on the road trip to Pittsburgh because of an injury, kept trying to hit on Sunny. After being turned down a second time, he apparently got very vulgar and crude with her, and Diesel heard the commotion and stepped out and basically told the guy that if he didn't want to be on the disabled list a lot longer to leave her alone. He took one look at the size of Diesel and apparently slinked off. Shawn Michaels taped a Jenny Jones episode on January 12th, not sure of air date, where a guy who is a wrestling fanatic gets to meet his favorite wrestler. Razor Ramon taped a Jerry Springer on January 15th doing a Make-A-Wish gimmick. Besides Raw for the weekend of January 6th, Mania did a 1.7 and Action Zone a 1.5. They will be doing a match on the preview channel immediately before the Rumble live from Fresno where two guys in the Rumble will have a singles match. The winner gets number 30 and loser gets number 1 in the entrance order. Pretty clever gimmick. They'd be well suited to put two guys in there who can really go to set the stage for an upbeat show. Titan got an item planted in the gossip section of the New York Daily News on January 15th and alluded to it on Raw. It read, Ted Turner is ready to get into the ring with WWF Honcho Vince McMahon, say sources. We hear Turner, the owner of the rival World Championship Wrestling, CNN and the Atlanta Braves, wants to scalp McMahon because the WWF has parodied him in sketches, using a tall, thin, mustachioed man with a silly-sounding southern drawl named Billionaire Ted. Turner, who needs this little wrestling outfit like we need a narrow jacket, wasn't mad because one skit implied his wrestlers used steroids. Rather, say sources, he was angered because he was portrayed as a hillbilly with a bad suit and Ted's a little sensitive. Added a source, Billionaire Ted doesn't like Billionaire Ted and wants the feud to end. Expect a Bischoff response to the item in the paper this week. The reader's pages. David Whitley of Box 283 Swan Point Drive, Washington, North Carolina 27889 is looking for videos of SMW. USWA, 1980s NWA, and WCW photos and programs. Greg Mader of 6710 Watts. Devon, Chicago, Illinois 60631 is looking for a supplier of ECW tapes. Central Ohio Wrestling Association is looking for companies that can supply quality wrestling belts. Send info to Buddy Phillips, 3644 Macassar Drive, Westerville, Ohio 43081. Steel City Wrestling at 128 Stamm Avenue No. 4, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania 15210 is selling videotapes for $15 and t-shirts for $14. Steve Hellwagon of 8249 Broad Street, SW, Pataskala, Ohio 43062 has put together a 110-page book on Ric Flair, with results of more than 2,500 of Flair's matches dating back to 1972, complete career highlights, a bio listing of his best matches, best angles, and an interview with Flair for $30. This is a must for Flair fans. Stampede Wrestling Classics, care of Echo Video Productions, 3807 9th Street Southeast, Calgary, Alberta. T2G3C7 Canada is putting out a 5-volume set of Stampede Wrestling tapes. The tapes are $19.99 US plus $5 for postage and handling, or if you buy 4, you get the 5th free. The tapes highlight the early career matches of Bret Hart, Dynamite Kid, Brian Pillman, Chris Benoit, Hiroshi Hazi, Davey Boy Smith, Jushin Liger, Owen Hart, and more. Mike Lorifus of 6 Toomey Drive, Poughkeepsie, New York 12603 has tapes for trade. Tommy Noe of 701 Barton Drive, Morristown, Tennessee 37814 has handheld tapes of 60 SMW house shows. Send a SACE for a catalog. Eric Steinwise of 35 Union CT, Haskell, New Jersey 07420 is looking for an autographed 5x7 or 8x10 of Yokozuna and a Yokozuna action figure, and for tape lists. Terry Deason of 1153A4 Covert Avenue, Evansville, Indiana 47714 has numerous wrestling items for sale. Send a SACE for more info. Jeff Costa at 603-598-3755 has a wrestling training gym in New Hampshire and is willing to train wrestlers. Jody Boynes of 102S Fremont Street, Manchester, New Hampshire 03103 put out a 42-page booklet on the history of pro wrestling at the Boston Gardens for $3.50 with interviews with numerous major wrestling personalities about the arena such as Lou Albano, Bill Apter, Tony Atlas, Dory Funk, Terry Funk, Killer Kowalski, Ken Patera, Bruno Sammartino, Rick Steamboat, and Bill Watts. Really good. Greg Farrell of P.O. Box 3151, Wilmington, Delaware 19804 is an authorized dealer of NWA, USWA and SMW tapes, and has the October 28 Sabu vs. Devon Storm tape for $20. Rob Moore of Route 3 Box 170C, Quinlan, Texas 75474 is looking for issues of the Wrestling Lariat with interviews with Jim Cornette. Jeff Raymond of 57 to 1270 9th Avenue, Ridgewood, New York 11385 is looking for Calgary Hitmen merchandise and for a tape of the December 15th Calgary show. Legendary wrestling manager Bobby Davis of 1838 Christine Street, Westland, Michigan 48186 is looking for 1966-67 videotapes from the Detroit/Windsor area where he managed Dr. Jerry Graham. Spencer Chestnut of P.O. Box 484 West Point, Virginia 23181 is looking for managerial work and can send a resume tape to anyone who inquires. David Manns of 1781 Craig Drive, North Huntington, Pennsylvania 15642 has old wrestling newsletters and magazines for sale. Dan Cirquitella of 861 Nutmeg Drive No. 6, Reno, Nevada 89502 is looking for a cassette copy of Shawn Michaels' complete entrance music and for masks. Chris Jackson of IPW, 7903 Candlewood Drive, Alexandria, Virginia 22306 is looking for wrestlers and managers for shows in his area. Ron Ratner of 108E, 97th Street #5 Watt, New York 10029 is looking for All Japan, IWA, Super J Cup and USWA tapes with Vince McMahon. Mike Kelly at 313-427-3707 is looking for talent for his Great Lakes Wrestling out of Westland, Michigan. Josh Kimbrell of 1412 Elmwood No. 3, Lakewood, Ohio 44107 is selling CMLL action figures of Vampiro Canadiense for $10. Gary Jellison of 782 Shelby, Ontario Road, Mansfield, Ohio 44906 is looking for videos of the December 13th Sumo Hall J Cup show and December 15th Calgary show. Tony Perea of 340 Drake Avenue, Upland, California 91786 is selling tapes of his first 2 cards of New American Pro Wrestling for $10. Bernd Hashemian of Sotweg 26, 32,425 Minden, Germany is selling his collection of New Japan and All Japan tapes. Connecticut Pro Wrestling of P.O. Box 39, Onusville, Connecticut 06382 is looking for the address of S. Galway of Queens. J. Ounce of 5171 Diane Avenue, San Diego, California 92117. Tokyo Dome. 10 years from now, when asked to point to a match that captures Leon White's legacy as the greatest working big man in the history of the business, his match against Antonio Inoki on the January 4th Tokyo Dome card will be the first that comes to mind. It isn't the greatest all-around match of his career. It certainly isn't the flashiest match, or the most brutal, or the fastest paced. However, it is by far the single greatest performance in the career of Big Van Vader. A ton of credit needs to be given to Inoki, as it may have also been one of his best performances of the past 15 years. This wasn't because Inoki actually looked good in the ring. Rather, it was because for the first time in many a moon, Inoki allowed himself to be totally carried through a match in which he was continually being destroyed by his opponent. Vader hit all his signature spots, most of them in brutal fashion. On display were the moonsault, which Inoki took, the gorilla splash, the out-of-the-ring brawling, the crazy stiff punches, which opened up a hardway boxing-style cut above Inoki's eye, a brutal Nottawa, the release powerbomb, and probably the stiffest unprotected German suplex that Inoki has ever taken, and one that Rick Steiner would be envious of. It's funny to ponder the fact that Vader worked far stiffer with the 52-year-old Inoki than he did with Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, or Sting. Frankly, the only person he possibly has worked this stiff with in the US is Cactus Jack. All the credit in the world to Inoki for willingly working in this fashion is given his position. He certainly doesn't have to. But the value of it was that each Inoki comeback got a bigger pop than the previous one, before Vader would bring the crowd back to reality by cutting Inoki off and going back to beating him up. The psychology was tremendous, with Inoki not having the physical firepower to withstand Vader's onslaught, but never losing his desire and finding crafty ways to turn things around. Inoki pulled moves out of the Takata vs. Vader playbook, using moves Takata made credible against Vader, like kicks to the hamstring, which Vader sold great, and the cross armbreaker. The finish was the best one they could have done given who was winning, with Inoki finally cinching in the cross armbreaker in the middle and Vader submitting to the move Takata used to beat him in 1993. Given that Takata was also going to be using that move to win the Iwgp title from Keiji Muto, it was the perfect move to use. Much like Toshiaki Kawada's surreal singles performance against Gary Albright in October, this was the definitive example of Vader carrying a limited opponent in perfect fashion. Vader worked to Inoki's strengths, worked away from and covered up his weaknesses, and put together a match that was credible within its context. It was amazing the match held water, as it could have easily fallen apart with one false step. Yet Vader avoided all the potential pitfalls that could have exposed Inoki for what he really is, which also would have seriously hurt Vader's credibility in the end, as he was doing the job. As it was, due to the manner in which the match played out, Vader came out of it looking great. In stark contrast to this was the performance of Muto. Nobuiko Takata is one of the greatest workers in the history of the business. He was the best worker in his company for a 10-year period from 1985 to 1994. This may not sound impressive, but that was while working for 4 different companies: the original UWF, New Japan, the second UWF, and UWF International. Takata, not Ric Flair, Ted DiBiase, Barry Windham, or Tatsumi Fujinami, was the best male worker in the business from 1986-88. Since then, it has been hard to get a gauge on his true skill level due to the opponents he has faced. In his matches against good Japanese strong-style wrestlers like Kiyoshi Tamura and Kazuo Yamazaki, his wrestling was beautiful to watch, with crisp striking using the feet, smooth back-and-forth mat work on the ground, and the prototypical psychology for strong-style wrestling. However, most of his major opponents in the 1990s were monsters like Albright, Vader, Koji Kiao, and Dan Severn. His matches with them were spotty, but always dependent upon what the opponent could do and was willing to do. His true skills shine through in his first 2 matches with Vader, as the two worked together to produce matches that could hold water within UWFI style. Even better in hindsight were his matches with Albright. UWFI aficionados long recognized that Albright was a limited worker with a freaky look and an assortment of killer suplexes. Yet Takata took the looks and the suplexes and turned Albright into a superstar by having tremendous matches that avoided all of Albright's obvious limitations. With the exception of the current best worker in the world, Kawada, nobody has ever come close to leading Albright through matches that were remotely in the league of Takata's with Albright. At the Dome, with Muto passing the title to Takata, one would think he'd try to establish Takata and his style for a run at the top in New Japan. His performance turned out to border on being an embarrassment. On the same night, Inoki incorporated Takata's style into his match with Vader because they would be credible and familiar to the fans, ensuring that the match and performers would get over. Yet Muto seemed oblivious to doing what was needed to get Takata's style over. Muto sold a beautiful Achilles tendon hold in completely the wrong way to get the move over as dangerous. At no point in their matches has Muto let Takata break loose with his brutal kicks, though it was common to see him do so with Shinya Hashimoto. Muto not incorporating a series of knockdowns and near 10 counts kept Takata's striking moves from getting over. The bizarre way Muto sold the 2 cross arm breaks just before the finish, and the finish did little to establish the move as a feared finisher. Perhaps most embarrassing was Muto's stalling and laying around in the first half of the match. Every time Takata tried an offensive move, Muto worked it in a fashion that led nowhere, leaving Takata with a puzzled look on his face. Sensing that Muto wanted to sell for him early and aware the match was going nowhere, Takata would do something that most fans that weren't thoroughly familiar with strong style would be unlikely to see. Trying to get something going time after time, Takata would offer an opening to Muto, be it an arm or leg, in the hopes Muto would go on offense and could exchange a series of back-and-forth mat holds. Sadly, Muto wouldn't bite, preferring to dog it through much of the match in typical bad Muto style. Even sadder was that when good Muto showed up for the finish, Takata went out of his way to correctly sell all of his offense to build heat and make Muto look good before beating him at the end. This is not to say that Takata is nearly the worker he was at his peak. He doesn't appear to be in the condition he once was. His body isn't as tight anymore. But looking closer, there are still signs he has a lot left, particularly his trademark of calmly thinking his way through a match. But either Muto is the wrong opponent for him, or New Japan is intentionally trying to keep him from shining. This would be a mistake, as an over Takata showing his best on top would add a fresh element to Muto, Hashimoto, and Chono. In addition, of all the top Japanese wrestlers in their early 30s, Takata is the one with the best past track record, as a major draw beyond the drawing power of the company he worked for. It would be sad if New Japan doesn't take full advantage of what it has. A few comments on the names of moves. The move people are calling the Tiger Bomb is actually called Tiger Driver 91. Every time I see it in magazines, and when it was named the best finishing maneuver at this year's All Japan Awards banquet, it is called Tiger Driver 91. My memory conforms with a letter from Matt Obma of seeing the move for the first time during the legendary June 1994 Misawa vs. Kawada match. However, the Japanese are usually fanatically accurate on these things, and he first used the move to beat Akira Tao on a television match on January 26, 1991 at Korakuen Hall. As for the name Tiger Bomb, I have no idea where that got started. My memory is different from Obma on the Tiger Suplex. I have a pretty clear recollection that move wasn't invented by Misawa, but rather by Satoru Sayama. Misawa did invent a variation of the Tiger Suplex he uses every few years, most notably to beat Kenta Kobashi in the 1995 Champion Carnival Tournament. It is similar to Mayumi Ozaki's Tequila Sunrise, with him combining a single chicken wing and half Nelson and taking it over German suplex style for the pin. The move is called Tiger Suplex 85, which leads me to believe it was invented in 1985. Again, we've probably seen it earlier but don't remember it, as Misawa rarely uses it today. On the jackknife, Kobashi hardly invented that move. The jackknife move, which actually is only the part of grabbing your opponent's legs and flipping over into a leg cradle, has been around for years and called jackknife for the entire time. What Kobashi did was incorporate this old-time move combined with a power bomb, inventing what is now called the jackknife power bomb. As far as brainbuster in Japan, the vertical suplex has been called brainbuster in Japan for years. Get any tape of 1970s Japanese wrestling and you'll hear it clearly. I suspect that it was called brainbuster in the 60s, but I have no clear recollection of hearing the term in matches of that era I've seen. Even what we call a superplex is called a brainbuster by Japanese play-by-play men, though they will usually add a comment about top rope if that style of superplex is used. I've seen no evidence that the move called the brainbuster in the US, that Dick Murdoch and Jim Garvin used, predates the Japanese calling a vertical suplex a brainbuster. In Japan, moves like Murdoch's are called a variety of names, both officially by the promotion and the media, and in slang by fans. Hashimoto's finisher is a brainbuster DDT, which is logical as it starts like what is called a brainbuster in Japan, but the drop ends like a DDT. I also heard similar moves called dangerous brainbuster and high-angle DDT. On the Niagara Driver, it seems to be becoming the generic name for a backbreaker-style move dropped into a powerbomb. The exact methods, execution, and finish of the move differ, but that appears to be where we are headed. As far as moves being called consistently in Japan, they aren't 100% consistent. Tao's new power bomb is essentially the Liger bomb, but it is called the jumping power bomb and the dynamic power bomb. The announcers sometimes call Steve Williams' backdrop driver a dangerous backdrop, even when the move is clearly a backdrop driver. Still, they are more consistent than U.S. announcers. John Williams, Arcadia, California. WWF parodies. Vince McMahon's slam on WCW and its old-timers was hilarious. In journalism, you're taught that the best defense against libel is the truth. Every wrestling fan knows the knocks McMahon put on WCW were 100% true. I know some won't approve of getting into name-calling, but I can't blame McMahon after the Alundra Blaze betrayal. Vince knocked WCW more effectively in that short skit than WCW has with constant knocks and low blows for months. Ed Branscombe. Kannapolis, North Carolina. It's time for a truce concerning WWF and WCW. First of all, by trying to one-up each other on Monday nights, they've given away their best product free. Why would I want to pay to see something I can see for free? Second, this children's game of bad-mouthing each other cheapens pro wrestling as a whole because there is so much cross-pollination between the two groups that most see them as virtually the same. Stop the infantile games and skits. It's turning me off. Bestow the virtues of your own product. I know of no other business rivalry that resorts to these slimy tactics. John Bamberger. San Anselmo, California. DM, watch any political ads? Your mostly justifiable bias against Terry Bollea is now threatening to cloud your objective judgment in the WWF versus WCW wars. Aside from whatever dubious entertainment value they may deliver, the Billionaire Ted segment are a neon sign of their own, one of anxiety, the same way that Bob Dole's attacks on billionaire Forbes are hard evidence of how insecure Dole feels about his support. Those Nitro snipes at Raw are strictly juvenile, but Raw's extra investment to custom-produce special segments complete with impersonator parodies and on-film production values demonstrates not sharp humor or business but increasing desperation, above and beyond the hypocrisy of the WWF's never-ending steroid story. This gimmick stinks as an advanced sign of panic. No matter how much fun hardcores derive from the attacks on Hogan, mainstream fans can see through the WWF's claim of bogus superiority and recognize they are wasting both capital and air time which should be invested in proving its own superiority. Pesos wasted on amateur theater might be the difference between signing and missing out on the next Shawn Michaels. S.C. Dacey. Hollywood, California. Bad announcing. Thanks for your continual writing about the announcing. Having worked both color and play-by-play for PCCW, OPWF and PCW in the Northwest, I understand how important television commentating is for any promotion. It is the lifeblood of the promotion. How inept, uninformed and self-aggrandizing announcers continue in the major promotions is beyond me. Steve McMichael, Bobby Heenan, Dusty Rhodes and Eric Bischoff are the worst ever. They seem to forget they are supposed to be getting the storylines over, not poke holes through them. There is no excuse for not knowing the wrestlers' finishing holds and specialty holds because you can learn all that from a quick conversation with the boys. Bruce Anderson has decided to continue as commissioner of the Oregon Boxing and Wrestling Commission. This has put a hold on any plans Roddy Piper has on promoting in Oregon. Discussions have been held about crossing the river and competing with Sandy Bar in Washington, but nothing serious has come of it. Anderson's decision discouraged several investors from putting any money up for a new promotion. The feeling is that Anderson's enforcement of the rules is too stringent and hurts the ability to run certain angles necessary for long-term programs. On the bright side, CH 32, the local WB station, has promised to release the WWF time slot on Saturday afternoons to a local promotion. Sandy Bar's promotion has had a good run the past 3 or 4 weeks. Billy Jack Haynes continues to be the big draw and his matches with Jesse Barr were fair. However, you still had to put up with the undercards. How many times can one watch Colonel De Beers in 6-minute time limit matches for the TV trophy? Barr's television production is horrible, bad lighting, bad camera angles and Dutch Savage as announcer. The long pauses between Savage's sentences are too much to take. The big question is how long will Haynes be around before he no-shows and burns another bridge? He continues to tell people he's headed to Japan, but never says what promotion, and that Bryan Adams will be his partner. WCW Nitro on January 1st was another example of amazing booking. Savage gets the knucks from Arnold Anderson and gets the pin. Hogan doesn't sell a thing for flair. Even with outside interference, Hogan destroys all of the Horsemen and some of the Dungeon of Doom all by himself, Last count he destroyed 8 guys. Then Savage hits the ring and they try and sell a grudge tag match against Flair and Anderson for next week. What grudge? They beat everyone up by themselves and ran them all off. Maybe if Savage had lost via screw job to Anderson, or if Hogan and Flair had gone to a time limit draw or another screw job finish. It's not like WCW limits the number of screw jobs per show, then there would be a reason for a tag match. But why does Hogan even need a partner? He destroyed 8 guys by himself. Maybe those in charge at WCW are in need of a drug test for hallucinogenics. Frank Culbertson. Gresham, Oregon. About the only comment I have concerns Virgil Runnels. He needs to get out of his time warp and concede that time is passing him by. Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero need to be recognized as the top stars now. What worked when he was on top is painfully outdated today. People like Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair and Arnold Anderson should be protected as long as there is interest in them, but they need to be booked as mid-card attractions. Instead we have them on top and constantly have screw job finishes. It's annoying to see Bobby Heenan and Rhodes joke at and laugh through quality 4-stars matches turned in by Benoit, Guerrero and Malenko and then laud the mediocre performances of Savage, Hogan, Luger, Beefcake, etc. If Eric Bischoff is trying to improve wrestling, he needs to gradually change the entire psychology of quality of American wrestling. The market today simply doesn't yearn for the carny slapstick of yesteryear. I hope this will extend to the broadcast booth as well. Alexander Bohr. Diamond Bar, California. ECW in regard to the January 8th issue about a refusal by parties to provide refunds for fans requesting them at the ECW December Glen Olden show. Who was asked by this fan or fans? It wasn't the ticket staff or any other representative of ECW. As a fan attending shows since February of 1992, I can categorically say that I've never seen problems with refunds. I've seen times at the arena when fans were allowed to see half a show, then offered the opportunity to receive a full refund. ECW, unlike WWF, WCW and most other promotions, has offered its fans refunds for no-shows, whatever the reason, without question. Considering the amount of work you have to do in a week to put out an observer, it may become easy for you to forget one little point. There are human beings whose reputations are involved with every item that you print. ECW and many other promotions have human beings that work hard for a small amount of money because they love this business and think they are creating something special. They view casual comments about their honesty as anything but casual. Bob McGee. Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I've been following ECW since its inception and started going to live events in August 1994. I have enjoyed most of the shows and watched as the popularity of this organization has grown. I've defended them and criticized them. I feel that after House Party 96, I will no longer attend any more events. Did the shows become unwatchable? Did I feel it was dangerous? No and no. I've been satisfied with their product and up until this weekend, was happy with most aspects of the promotion. But I feel the company has become overly greedy. There was a time when they cared about their audience. ECW has outgrown its present location and keeps selling tickets even when there is no place to put the fans. I was sold a ticket even after there was no place to watch the show. I spent the night looking for a place to see. I wasn't alone either. There were a lot of fans who paid their money and saw none of the matches. I think it's time for ECW to do one of the following: either sell only the amount of tickets that there are available seats for, or move to a bigger place. I'm sure if the fire marshal was at this show, they would have a field day and levy a fine for filling the building well beyond capacity. As for me, I'll relish the events I've seen live and forget about wasting my time and money on events I can't see an arena run by people who no longer care about their fans. Michael Bechtel. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.